All right, good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. Nice to hear people talking and visiting and catching up. Welcome to today's board meeting. It's Tuesday, January 28th. Glad you are all here, and we will start with a salute to the flag. Supervisor Holmes, would you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, just a quick note. Supervisor Euler is temporarily absent, but he'll be with us shortly. We will move to the consent agenda, and I will have the clerk read the procedure.
All items on the consent agenda have been recommended for approval by County Executive Department. All items will be approved by a single roll call vote. Anyone may ask to address consent items prior to the board taking action, and the item may be moved for discussion.
All right. Any board members want to remove an item?
I have none.
And anyone from the public? Yes, sir. Good morning.
15D, the legislative program, and 15E, the impact fee program.
All right. Thank you very much. We will remove those, and then we will take those after public comment. But if we could go ahead and take roll call, please. Oh, wait. Do we need a motion? We need a motion. Okay. Okay, so Holmes and then Wygant.
Wygant?
Yes.
Holmes?
Yes.
Gustafson? Yes. Gore?
Yes. Terrific. Thank you very much. Let's move to public comment, and this is for items that are not on our agenda. If people would like to come speak, you are welcome to come on up to the podium. And if there are a couple of you all, you're welcome to sort of line up over here. That way you're set and ready to go. Good morning.
Well, good morning. My name is Ray Thompson. I'm a citizen here in the city of Auburn, and I'm here representing what is commonly referred to as the DeWitt Community Complex. That being, the Board of Supervisors approved a 2-year opportunity last April for the community complex out there to develop a plan to preserve certain buildings out at the DeWitt Center, or commonly referred to as the Placer County Government Center. Several community members have gotten active in all that, and we've teamed up with the Historical Preservation Fund of the Native Sons of the Golden West, that is acting as our financial partner to fund this. For the time being, we're in the process of receiving and getting our 501(c), our incorporation papers are all in the works. They'll be on their way. We've had a mixer or promotion on January 9th. A video has been produced. A number of community leaders were invited and business owners. Those hopefully would participate in the funding of this project ultimately. It was well received in the community. The video has been viewed by roughly 3,000 people so far, and I would ask all of you to view that video. And if you're familiar with, have we passed out these to all of you yet? It's just a little brochure on what we've put together, kind of proclaiming our intentions, and
if you'd like to give them to the clerk, then she can give those out to us, sir.
As the community becomes more aware of this, we will continue to drop by on occasion and keep this board updated to our progress. We ask that you remain with an open mind and accept any information we may give you. Someday there'll be a time where we have a solid proposal. We're in the process, like I say, of funding, getting community support. This is very important that the community does support this. There's only a few of us on the board or on this panel. We're not enough. We need the community behind this. So do your homework, take a look at our webpage, view the video, remain open-minded. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Appreciate it.
Hello, my name is Mona Leberts, and I live on Meadow Glen Road in Auburn. I spoke with Megan Wood last week, and she put me in touch with District Supervisor Cindy Gustafson's aide, Kelly Magana, and we spoke about an email that I was trying to get onto the agenda. Anyway, I do have the email that I sent along with some additional items. I just want to make sure that the board is aware of the concerns of all homeowners on Meadow Glen Road and any other individuals affected by the DeWitt Sewer Trunk Line Replacement Project, which is scheduled to begin very soon. I had a meeting with the developer and Department of Public Works on January 13th, and I did not get any indication that they truly plan to take my concerns into consideration and the concerns of my neighbors. And it's all outlined in that email that I sent. I've since spoken with Kevin Bell, Deputy Director of Public Works, and he appears to be working on addressing one of the issues at hand, and I thank Kevin for that. He is here. Where initially the county and developer were insisting that homeowners giving them an extra 10-foot of easement was equal to abandoning a rarely used 25-foot temporary construction maintenance agreement. According to my telephone discussion with Kevin last night, it sounds like they now understand that is not an equal trade, and they are working to remedy the situation. I shared my concerns about the road with Kevin Bell again yesterday, explaining that each section of the road is owned by individual homeowners and stressing that the road cannot handle heavy equipment and heavy trucks. It's a private road. When the county was doing some work on the sewer plant on Joger a few years ago, trucks were turning around on our road, and just that little bit of use did cause damage that was never corrected. So we're really very concerned about this project, which I envision is going to take at least 6 months up and down our road. Every homeowner impacted by this project is either a retiree or someone who works from home. So we will be there during the entire construction project. The county may not feel that we deserve to have our road resurfaced, which is what I discussed with Kevin last night. But if you think about all the noise, the dirt, the inconvenience to all of us who are home most of the time, and the lack of use of our yards during the whole entire spring, I think asking for our road to be resurfaced is not a big deal. I think it's important that the full board be aware of our concerns, and I hope that the board will make sure that things are finalized without homeowners being taken advantage of, which is what we fully believe was originally the intent. So, I'm not sure what your capacity is. Cindy, I'd love to talk to you. Okay? Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your comments. I appreciate it. And Mary Jo, come on up, and then afterwards we will have a report out, because I have asked staff to have a report out ready. We're still in public comment. Yes.
Sorry for taking so much of your time on this issue. My name is Nancy Jo Rixey, and I live on Lawrenson Road. And while you were reviewing the appeal for the ATC, the Auburn Track Club shot screen, that was approved by you and county staff, remember this wall was put up because of the noise transmission, reverberation, and excessive use of the trap club beyond their historic use. I don't care about the shot screen. It's now been 2 years since I filed my first written complaint with Placer County Code Enforcement Planning, and 2.5 years since I have discussed the situation with many county staff, personnel, and elected officials. It's apparent that with the help of the county staff, this shot screen was pushed through. I'm assuming the revocation of the shot screen permit was the attempt by staff to right a wrong decision. By just removing the top portion of the screen, this still doesn't address the real situation at ATC, which has been going on for several years, operating beyond their historic hours and use. But the real problem is the sound transmission and the reverberation beyond the Placer County noise ordinance and the violation of their use permit. If county staff had spent as much time in investigating the current use at ATC as they did helping push the shot screens through or revocation pamphlet, its permit, they would have found that ATC is operating differently than they had in 1948 and are in violation of their use permit. My concern at this point is that ATC might, under pressure by whoever knows, integrate the school trap clubs into their historic hours. This could allow them to have all 5 traps going with 2 per trap. That's 10 people or kids shooting for 5 to 6 hours straight with consistently high decimal levels and highly adverse reverberations. That's Saturdays, Sundays, and Thursdays. That's a lot. Last night I was out and they were shooting from 4 to 7:30. Could hear them while I was in the shower. I'm once again requesting for the 3rd time here, the 2nd time to our elected officials, and several times to staff, that someone from HHS or a consultant they hire, hires, be involved in the noise transmission and reverberation that is being transmitted from ATC with or without the wall and its effect on the neighborhood. I hope you guys have all read this 152-page summary. It affects all of you. All your kids in each one of your districts are affecting me, affecting our neighborhood by going out there and shooting repeatedly. It's good for them, but they could find someplace else to go. I'm hoping you've all read it. Some of my notes on it does not include how many complaints have been filed regarding ATC over the last 3 to 4 years. Only emails to staff, not the ones I wrote to staff. Thank you. You know I'll be back.
Thank you very much for your comments. Let's do it afterwards.
Okay, perfect.
Good morning. I'm Leslie Warren, Auburn, California. Although it's not comfortable for me to do so, I feel compelled to come forward this morning and express my displeasure over Supervisor Euler's behavior at the Sunset Area Plan, Plaza Ranch Specific Plan public hearing on the 12th of December, on the 11th of December. His behavior was inconsistent with polite civil discourse, and his accusations run counter to CEQA law. I do this morning to demonstrate to citizens, many of whom wrote me letters of concern about his behavior, that our elected officials are accountable to us. So I just want to make sure that this is in the public record. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment here in Auburn? All right, we'll close public comment in Auburn, and anybody in, Tahoe? Public comment from Tahoe. All right, seeing none, we will close public comment, and we're going to move to items 15D and 15E. First 15D that have been pulled from the consent agenda. 15D, and it looks like Joel is on his way up, is the Placer County 2020 Legislative Platform. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of your board, Todd, Karen. Joel Joyce with the County Executive Office. Following the board's discussion in December, staff is now bringing forward the final platform for your board's approval. Following that discussion in December, a few changes were made to the platform, including adding a section regarding limiting the county's and the residents' and businesses' impact from public safety power shutoffs, as well as limiting the county's liability regarding inverse condemnation as the current law stands now. Beyond that, since December, the governor released what we call the January budget, the governor's budget. In that, it's very centered on heavy policy and focus to start negotiations with the legislature regarding the budget for the upcoming fiscal year. The governor did lay out a few highlights, including $750 million for homeless housing, $12 billion over the next 5 years, what they're terming climate resiliency. This is your forest health impacts, greenhouse gas reductions, et cetera. As well as you're looking at SB 45, which is the climate change bond that's out there. It was recently increased last week from $4.1 billion to, I believe, $5.5 billion. The governor also released $700 million, growing to $1.5 billion in the next 3 years for preventative health care aimed at unsheltered homeless populations. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you. Looks like there are no questions from our board. Questions, we'll open this up to the public. Mr. Garabedian, I'm guessing you had a question.
Good morning again. Mike Garabedian for Placer County tomorrow. I think I'll just focus on page 13 of the report, the 3 items there, 3, 4, and 5. First of all, the Environmental Quality Act urging that be simplified, etc. I want to point out that this is a disclosure law. It's not a law that stops development or limits. It's just about telling what the environmental impacts are, and that's the purpose. So the reason developments have problems is because the land is flat. The land that doesn't have hazards and environmental limitations is becoming less and less, and it's getting more and more expensive to build because of the environmental limitations. And we need to know about them, whether it's the results of a fire like down the coast and things like that. So I think this approach, this simplification is too broad that you're talking about lobbying for. Then the next one on the basic permit program, it is the fundamental law, the Federal Water Pollution Act, Clean Water Act, provide for these permits for dischargers. That's what these NPDES permits are. And you're talking about requirements that are impossible to meet. I mean, that's simply not true. In fact, the opposite has happened far too often. Permits are not strong enough. And so there's a real mistake in there in point of view, and it's kind of a thing to be ashamed about, to suggest that you want to support weakening and not having good water quality in the county in California. And finally, as I've mentioned before, the transportation aspect, the Placer Parkway project and so forth, should not be a priority for you to be lobbying for federal funds when there's so many other critical transportation needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? And seeing none, we will close public comment. Any questions or concerns, folks?
I move approval of the item.
All right, we have a motion by Supervisor Holmes. Second by Supervisor Wygant. And all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. And all right, thank you. Motion carries. Appreciate that. And we will move on to item 15E, which is ordinance updating and standardizing the procedure for annual adjustments to impact fees. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. Dave DeFonte with the County Executive Office. This is the second reading of an ordinance introduced and discussed at your board on January 14th, and it accomplishes really one simple administrative task, and that's aligning various fees on the same schedule. So currently, we have staff from multiple departments coming to your board multiple times a year to discuss inflating certain fees by consumer price indexes or some kind of inflator. This ordinance change basically aligns all those fees on the same schedule, so we hopefully will have one item coming to your board annually instead of multiple, and hope that it provides greater clarity for our customers. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to discuss.
Thank you. It looks like no questions. We'll open this up to the public.
Michael Garabedian for Placer County. Tomorrow I just have one question. I think you've heard it before, and that is, are any of these fees here waived at this time?
Great question. We'll have you take any other public comment. Looks like none. And would you mind answering that question?
I'm personally not aware of any of these fees being waived, but I may ask some of my county compatriots if we've waived any of these fees in the past.
Right. And these are just regular costs of fees of doing business when you're...
These are typically impact fees, so when you come to
All
the front counter and want to build a home, these are fees that are a charge to make sure that the strains or the impacts of new development are mitigated appropriately via the payment of fees and the construction of facilities necessary to serve that development. So
now,
traffic
course,
fees, park
right.
fees, et cetera.
Now with ADUs and the mandate from the state, fees like this will be waived for any unit that's an ADU that's built under 750 square feet, correct?
So that is a brand new law that just went into effect January 1. So these fees, I'm not sure if waive is the correct term, but they will not be charged to accessory dwelling units of 750 square feet or less. That is correct.
Dave, is this also pertaining to like the generator fee that we waive for those that want to put a conduit into their house?
Those are a bit different. So these are impact fees on new development. That would be a fee that our planning and building folks charge to make sure that the cost of their time is being covered when they're processing those applications and inspecting those installations. These are impact fees to make sure basically county facilities are improved necessary to serve new development. So the ones addressed via this ordinance change are a couple of parks fees, traffic fee, and the Riolo Vineyard specific plan fee.
Great.
I didn't have a question. I just had a comment that I appreciate the simplification for us, but even more so for our constituents, that they understand and we're not changing midstream with different funding cycles or, rate changes, fees changes. So thank you for simplifying that for all
You're
of us.
welcome. And that was certainly our hope to do just
Absolutely.
that.
If I could simply clarify for the record that this particular ordinance, which is here for its adoption, simply amends the particular codes as to how the adjustments would happen. This has nothing to do with the ADUs and anything on those. That was a separate ordinance. This is strictly in terms of the timing of the adjustments.
All right, thank you very much. And if I could then, without any other questions, can I have the clerk read the motion, please? Oh. Well, you want to make a motion? Do we need to have it read out loud? If it's in the consent agenda, it's here. So we don't need to have it read out loud. So we will have Supervisor Holmes has made a motion and a second from Gustafson. All those in favor? Aye. We need to roll call this one. So it's an ordinance. Roll call, please.
Wygant?
Yes.
Holmes? Yes. Gustafson? Yes. Gore?
Yes. All right, thank you. We are now moving to board member and county executive reports. Any board members have anything to report out? No? All right. And then, Todd, if you would just report out on just the status of the wall at the Trap Club.
Sure. So we did do some research on kind of the timing for the Trap Club, the appeal. There is a time frame, February 7th. The appellant has the ability to submit their documentation regarding that Trap Club appeal. At that point in time, our staff's going to actually take a look at the information that's provided, and we're going to do that expeditiously. So our intent is to reach out to the appellant, talk about a time frame when we could actually bring this forward. There are some noticing requirements and hearing requirements. 10-day notice on the hearing, however, due to newspaper publications, that's usually about a 15 to 17-day window, depending on the time of the publication. So we want to ensure that the noticing requirements are up to date. Having said that, we did put a date for April 7th. That is actually the last date that we can do that. So that's, I would say that's kind of a worst-case scenario. Our intent is to move this forward as quickly as possible, making sure that we have appropriate information to make responses to the appellant's issues they may bring forward on the 7th. So we'll keep you abreast as a board about the timing of this, but I would anticipate it'd be sooner than that, but I'm going to stick to a date that we know we have to have that done prior to. But my intent, I think staff's intent, to have resolution on this issue as quickly as possible and brought to you for a decision.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, we will move on to our 9:10 item, which is a proclamation, February 2020 as Grand Jury Awareness Month. I'm guessing we have a couple of folks here. Before I read the proclamation, we need to actually approve it. So may I have a motion to do so?
So moved.
Second. All right, Supervisor Wygant and Supervisor Gustafson. All those in favor? Aye. No opposition? All right, motion carries. Terrific. And it looks like we've got a couple of folks here. As you come up, I'm going to go ahead and read the proclamation. And I'm not going to read all the whereases to simplify it, but this is in the matter of a proclamation recognizing February 2020 as Grand Jury Awareness Month in Placer County, whereas every year in each of California's 58 counties, 19 ordinary citizens, did you all know that you were ordinary? Maybe extraordinary, I would say, take an oath to voluntarily serve a term of 1 year as grand jurors. And Whereas grand juries conduct their investigations under the auspices of the Superior Court of California and have broad access to public officials, employees, records, and information. One of the most important functions of a grand jury is to review the operations of the officers, departments, and agencies of local government. And whereas grand juries are charged with investigating and reporting on local governmental operations to assure that their responsibilities are being fulfilled legally, efficiently, honestly, and in the best interest of the public. Grand juries serve as a watchdog authority and are well suited to the effective investigation of local governments because they are independent bodies, operationally separate from the entities and officials they investigate. And whereas the grand jury's fact-finding efforts result in reports that contain specific recommendations aimed at identifying problems and offering ways to improve government operations and enhance responsibilities. And whereas the hard work done by grand juries has a great effect on our communities and makes California a better place to live. And whereas it is appropriate to recognize the efforts of those jurors, both past and present, who have volunteered their time and service to the Placer County Grand Jury. Now, therefore, let it be proclaimed that this proclamation was duly passed by the Board of Supervisors of the County of Placer today, January 28th, 2020, proclaiming the month of 2020, February, as Grand Jury Awareness Month, and that was short. So with that, I would like to present this to you, but do you have any comments before I get up, hand it to you, and we take a photograph? And please introduce yourself as well.
Good morning. My name is Walter Moore. I'm the foreperson for the 2019-2020 grand jury. So just want to thank you all for the proclamation. Also, I want to thank you for the foresight for the county and for the grand jury and for the board for awarding or allocating laptops this year for the grand jury. So thank you very much. It's been a big help to us. I can actually take work home, and my wife is not very happy about that, but it's not a deal breaker yet, so that's a good thing. The other thing is that we have, again, this year looked at trying to make the grand jury for Placer County best in class. So one thing we have done is updated the citizens complaint form on the website. Now, in the past, you could only print it, write your comments, and then send it by mail. We've actually updated that this year to where you can actually comment, make your comments online, and actually submit it by email to the grand jury. So that's a big change for us, and thank you very much for your support.
Terrific, thank you. Yes,
I'm Karen Anghuse, and I'm president of the Placer County Grand Jurors Association. I served in 2014, 15, and 15, 16. And I want to thank you for recognizing the hard work of these folks. We have a number of current grand jurors with us today, and they work very hard and do a really good and important service for the county. And I just want to put a little plug in that we're always looking for new ones, and the application is due in May, and they're on the Placer County Superior Court website. So feel free, if you feel so inclined, to get to be a watchdog. There you go.
Great, thank you very much. Let me any comments? All right, I'll come on down.
Will you do my picture?
Both of y'all. There we go.
Are you in there? Everybody be in.
Wow.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Are you all done?
Yes, yeah. And I'm going to take this just so I can present it to them.
Thank you.
All right, sometimes hard work is appreciated, so thank you, folks. We will now move on to our 9:20 timed item, and this is accessory and junior dwelling accessory and junior accessory dwelling unit sewer fees. Not easy for me to say. Good morning.
Good morning, Jared Gore, board members. Jared Deck, program manager for environmental engineering. So due to the recent signed state laws pertaining to accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units, I'll be presenting the proposed ordinance changes to reflect these laws. As stated during Cedar's presentation last meeting and also mentioned earlier in this meeting, these laws were put into place to reduce barriers in building secondary dwellings. The changes to government code sections which govern the application of sewer connection fees are reflected in the proposed amendments to Placer County Code Chapter 13. Accessory dwelling units will now not be mandated to pay a connection fee unless they require a new or separate connection to the public sewer. Previously, SMD1 connection fees were $5,753 per accessory dwelling unit. Staff is continuing to work with the county's regional partners to ensure sewer fees are applied in a consistent manner across the board. For your reference, the county monthly sewer service charge will not be changed due to these new laws. Staff supports this request. In order to move forward, I request your board conduct a public hearing to consider the public testimony and adopt an ordinance amendment to Placer County Code Chapter 13, Sections 13.12.010, 13.12.240, 13.12.250, and 13.12.270. If there are any questions, I'll happily answer those.
Great, thank you. Looks like there are no questions, but I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. And anyone from the public want to make a comment? All right, seeing none, we will close the public hearing, and the item has been read out. So
Move approval.
I have a motion by Gustafson.
Second.
Second by Wygant. Roll call, please.
Wygant.
Yes.
Combs.
Yes.
Gustafson.
Yes.
Gore.
Yes. Thank you. Appreciate it. And we'll move on to the 925 item. This is the Placer County Sustainability Plan. And our team is getting set and ready to go.
Good morning, Madam Chair. I'm Crystal Jacobson with the Placer County Planning Services Division, and the item before you today is the Placer County Sustainability Plan, which is a work program that has been underway for a couple of years now, so we're pleased to be here bringing this forward to your board for consideration today. With me is Angel Green, who is the lead on this project and has managed this effort and will be presenting today, so I'm going to turn it over to Angel.
Thank you. All right. Well, good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. Again, my name is Angel Green. I am with the Placer County Planning Services Division. I will be providing a presentation on the Placer County Sustainability Plan for your consideration today. I do have with me our consultants, Tammy Sill and Eli Crispy, who are also available shall any questions come up. All right. So the Sustainability Plan is a comprehensive roadmap that outlines various programs and policies that will be undertaken by both the county as well as the community in order to achieve the greatest greenhouse gas emission reduction strategies and cost-effective measures that can help to reduce emissions and enhance the community's resiliency while maximizing economic benefits. The Sustainability Plan is a strategic plan that includes countywide initiatives, and these include various components within the plan. The first is the Greenhouse Gas Emission Inventory and Forecast, which identifies key sources of emissions occurring within the county's operations as well as within our community-wide sectors. It is also used to set the foundation for developing emission reduction strategies. The second component is the vulnerability assessment, which identifies the people, the infrastructure, places, critical infrastructure that may be harmed or has already been harmed by climate risk. It allows us to identify the resources necessary to improve resiliency against climate-related hazards in Placer County. The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Strategy and Adaptation Strategy contain those measures and strategies necessary to help reduce emissions and, again, to build resiliency. Last, we have the implementation program, which ensures successful implementation of the plan, which will allow staff to be able to prioritize strategies and actions necessary to achieve the county's goals. So for the outreach and engagement, over the last few years, we've had a substantial amount of outreach with extensive public input over, again, a 2.5-year period. This included 2 series of meetings with our municipal advisory committees, as well as 2 series of workshops. The first series of workshops and meetings with our municipal advisory committees were to inform the community as to the intent and the purpose and the county's vision behind the sustainability plan, and to seek input on the technical studies that had been prepared at that time, including both the greenhouse gas emission inventory and the vulnerability assessment. After receiving much input, county staff and our consultant team, along with our technical advisory committee, helped to develop a number of strategies that helped us to develop the draft sustainability plan. The second series of municipal advisory committee meetings, along with the 2 series of workshops, including 1 study session and workshop with our planning commission in late summer of 2019, allowed us to share the proposed strategies within the plan and to receive comment from the public regarding the proposed draft strategy. There are additional outreach tools and avenues for public engagement, and these include both online engagement and surveys. We did develop a dedicated web page for this effort. Sustained Placer is the name of that actual web page on our county website. It allowed for the public to be able to participate in online activities, including a survey. We also included social media postings, news releases, and e-blasts. I'll also mention that we did hold a number of stakeholder meetings. These actually began early in the process in mid-2017, where we wanted to be able to introduce again the county's vision, but also to provide an opportunity to identify key issues early in the process. To date, staff has held more than 50 meetings with stakeholders, special districts, and interested parties. And last, I'll add that staff also worked with more than 400 interested parties through email communications, providing notices for meetings, and providing the detailed technical studies that were prepared for this plan. A full list of those meetings and with stakeholders are provided in Appendix B of the Sustainability Plan. So I'll touch just briefly on the regulatory environment. California has adopted a number of regulatory requirements for reducing the state's greenhouse gas emissions, but also addressing climate risk. AB 32 and SB 32, as well as a handful of executive orders, identify the emission reduction targets that the state must achieve for the years 2020, 2030, and 2050. And in response to those regulatory requirements, the California Air Resources Board prepared what is known as the Scoping Plan, which is essentially the state's climate action plan. It demonstrates how and when the state will achieve these targets. The state's emission reduction targets in the Scoping Plan, along with the guidance that's provided in the Scoping Plan, were used as the basis for setting the emission reduction goals within the Sustainability Plan. SB 379 requires cities and counties to include vulnerability assessments, identifying climate risks within their jurisdictions, and to incorporate adaptation strategies within their safety elements. This element here is required by January of 2022 and must be included within the county's safety element of the general plan. Last, we have the California Environmental Quality Act requirements, where with SB 97, we are required, jurisdictions are required to analyze and consider greenhouse gas emission impacts for the discretionary projects that they are taking action on. And last, we have SB 1241, where just recently wildfire was added as a resource category to the environmental checklist within our initial studies that we use to analyze potential fire hazard impacts. All right, so this brings me to the first component of the sustainability plan. I'll provide just a quick summary of each of these components. For the community-wide emission inventories, we did use, with the help of our consulting team, we did use the U.S. Community Protocol for Accounting and Reporting of Greenhouse Gas Emissions. Within this protocol, the sectors that were analyzed were done so consistent with these protocols. And those sectors that were looked at within the inventory include residential and non-residential energy. This would include electricity and natural gas use, including propane, fuel, and wood. For transportation, this would include emissions from on-road travel by people living in and visiting the unincorporated portions of the county. It also includes shipping goods to and from the unincorporated area. For solid waste, emissions are included from landfills and other solid waste sites within the county. For off-road emissions, this would include fuel use of vehicles or portable equipment that are used in construction, landscaping, and logging. Water and wastewater includes emissions occurring from potable water service and wastewater treatment facilities serving the unincorporated area of the county. Finally, the agriculture and forest management sector includes emissions from agricultural activities, again occurring in the unincorporated portions of the county, and this would include use of agriculture equipment, rice cultivation, forest biomass, and burning for fire prevention. Some of the key takeaways from the inventory show us that the largest sector within the community-wide sectors, as you can see, is our transportation, which makes up 42% of the inventory. And this is followed by energy, where we have a combined 33% for residential and non-residential energy. The inventory also shows that from 2005 to 2015, the county had a 16% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. For county operations, the emissions here that are included within each of these sectors include building and facilities, vehicle fleet, transit operations, refrigerants, public lighting, off-road equipment, employee commute and business travel, county-generated solid waste and county-operated solid waste facilities, county-operated wastewater treatment facilities as well. And we see clearly the largest sector here would be solid waste at 51%, followed by employee commute and travel at 17%. So within our greenhouse gas reduction component, we also have included a forecast. This forecast shows what the emissions might look like in the future if no action is taken at the federal, state, or local level. This forecast allows staff to determine an emission reduction target necessary to align with state goals. The forecast for the sustainability plan demonstrates the community-wide emissions are projected to increase 87% from 2015 levels by 2050. This would be due to the anticipated population and job growth in the unincorporated area. All right, so with completion of those studies and that inventory, it allowed staff and our consulting team, as well as our technical advisory committee, to develop a number of greenhouse gas emission reductions. This plan does include 68 measures to reduce community-wide sources and 47 measures to address county operations. And here I've included just a few examples, facilitating the installation of public electric vehicle charging stations, encouraging a mix of land use to support connectivity, to reduce trip length, promoting infill development that combines multiple land use types, and encourage on-site renewable energy generation and storage systems for existing residential units. Each strategy includes a description of the strategy, and this here, that is, my apologies for the small type here. But first you'll find that for each strategy, we do include a description of that strategy. And where there are known greenhouse gas emission reduction opportunities in future years, where we were able to quantify that reduction, those are also provided. We also have a list of action items that would be carried out by county staff in various departments in order to assure that each measure can be implemented and tracked. We also have the applicability, which would address whether this strategy would apply to existing development, future development, or county government operations. We also have implementation level, which will indicate whether the strategy is voluntary or mandatory. And last, I'll also mention the co-benefits for each of these strategies, whether it's conserving resources, promoting cost savings, or creating jobs. Each of those co-benefits are also identified with each of the strategies. All right, so moving on towards the progress towards targets. I think with all the comments we received, this might have been the most confusing table for folks, so I'll do my best to explain really what this table here means and what the plan is showing. So this sustainability plan demonstrates, after quantification of emission reduction potential from the proposed strategies, the county has successfully achieved the state's 2020 target, in fact exceeding that target with a 20% reduction in emissions since 2005. And we see this here with the absolute target and then the emissions with the sustainability plan. So essentially today we have met the state's recommended reduction of 15% below our 2005 levels. For the state's longer-term goals, we have the 2030 target under SB 32, and then a goal also for 2050, which has not been enacted yet, but is identified in a few executive orders that have been signed by previous governors. We have for 2030 the state's recommendation in their scoping plan. We have a goal of 6 metric tons per person, and right now a goal of 2 metric tons per person that the state is striving to achieve. So with our sustainability plan, we're able to show that the county is on a trajectory to meet this 6 metric tons by 2030. We're currently at 6.15, which is just a little shy of meeting that target. I'd like to just point out a few key points from the sustainability plan and the strategies that we've included. First, the greenhouse gas emission reduction strategies currently presented in the sustainability plan provide present a conservative participation rate and assumptions. And this is simply because some of the strategies may not actually, they're not mandates and they're not fully funded at this time. Many of the strategies we do know can achieve greater reductions with more certainty in implementation and participation. So for example, the sustainability plan contains several strategies that are aimed at reducing emissions by promoting more efficient land use patterns that will reduce the need to drive or reduce the trip length. And many of those strategies have yet to be fully quantified. The county is in the process right now of updating its housing element to take a closer look at land use patterns. We're also in the process of developing new CEQA thresholds for vehicle miles traveled pursuant to SB 743, which may bring more certainty to the additional transportation-related emission reductions that can come from these strategies. So once these efforts have been fully vetted, the emission reduction potentials from those efforts would aid in additional emission reductions within our transportation sector, which again is the largest sector within the county's inventory. We do expect with future updates to the sustainability plan that the county would likely be able to achieve these targets for 2030. Moving on to the second component for the adaptation strategy, the second technical study that was prepared is the vulnerability assessment, which includes an analysis of how climate-related hazards are affecting the unincorporated areas of the county and how hazards are projected to change in coming years. It also identifies the population and assets most susceptible to harm from climate-related disasters. As I shared, vulnerability assessments are now required by state law. Again, SB 379 requires that local jurisdictions conduct these assessments and include within their general plan no later than January of 2022. As part of that analysis, a total of 11 climate hazards were analyzed, which include agriculture and forestry pests and diseases, extreme heat, human health hazards, drought and wildfire, avalanche, flooding, landslides, and severe weather. The severity or sensitivity areas, rather, analyzed for significant vulnerabilities include populations, infrastructure, buildings and facilities, economic assets, ecosystems, and services. The vulnerability assessment did find a number of key effects that Placer County may face in the near future or are already facing. And these include increases in frequency and severity of extreme heat, greater extremes in participation, which can include more drought and more severe floods, more frequent and intense wildfires, increased spread of bark beetle infestations, and more intense winter storms followed by warmer conditions resulting in rapid melting of snow. So the results from the vulnerability assessment were then used by, again, our technical advisory committee and consulting team to develop the adaptation strategies proposed in the sustainability plan. The plan does include 111 adaptation strategies for each of the hazard areas, which are aimed at helping to mitigate hazards, to improve resiliency, and to adapt to long-term changes. Also to build on existing policies and programs, including the local hazard mitigation plan. For the last component, the implementation program, to ensure successful implementation of this plan, implementation strategies have been identified necessary to help the county reach its greenhouse gas emission reduction targets and goals necessary to improve resiliency. There are a total of 5 implementation strategies accompanied by action items to help further explain the efforts necessary to conduct the strategies efficiently. County staff and assigned responsible departments and agencies will need to ensure that each strategy is addressed and reported periodically to determine the county emission reduction targets are being met and that the county is moving towards greater climate adaptation. Once adopted, the sustainability plan would be considered a living document where periodic updates to the plan can be made to account for newer technology, programs, data, and policies at the state and local levels. Future actions at the state and local levels will also provide additional reductions necessary for bringing the county's emissions closer to the state's long-term targets. And I'll also just add that with one of these strategies we have here to continue to seek funding sources to implement this sustainability plan. As you heard earlier in your legislative update, the state has included within its efforts a substantial amount of funding that is aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also building resiliency throughout the state. And I'll add that one of the critical criteria for being able to be selected as one of those funding sources, we do know that the state and other outfits that are providing this funding are looking for jurisdictions who have committed to greenhouse gas emission reductions with preparation of these types of plans. And so it is our hope that with this plan and with implementation of each of these strategies, it will allow the county to be able to obtain much more of that funding that's been made available. All right, so I did mention just a few of the updates that we can consider, but I wanted to include that many of the sources that we use to analyze and quantify the reductions for greenhouse gas emissions are forever evolving and changing, and some of these you may already be familiar with. But we do have the California Green Building Standards, also known as the Cal Green Code. This is a triannual plan that's updated every 3 years, so we do expect the next update in 2022 to include additional energy reduction requirements as part of the Title 24 code, and those would likely provide additional reductions in our energy sector. The updated transportation and land use assumptions, we are expecting here this next year that the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, as well as Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, within their metropolitan transportation plans and their sustainable community strategies. They're currently in the process of updating those, and we do expect that with that new data it can bring some additional reductions for our inventories. The state scoping plan, again, outlines the various actions that the state will be taking to meet its targets, and those are updated every 5 years. We have the implementation of local actions that I've mentioned that in the sustainability plan that have yet to be quantified that can bring additional reductions. And last, there is an opportunity, if the county so wishes, to prepare what's known as a qualified greenhouse gas reduction strategy, where CEQA statutes allow for the streamlining of greenhouse gas emission analyses within their CEQA documents for discretionary projects that could certainly help to save time during the environmental review process and to reduce legal scrutiny. Also provide consistency in the way that we're mitigating for greenhouse gas emissions within our discretionary projects. All right, so that brings me to the draft plan that was provided for public review in August. We did allow for a 45-day public review period. We did receive more than 66 comment letters on the draft document, and those are included within Appendix D. Key issues that were raised include the voluntary nature of the strategies. Many folks felt that many of these strategies could actually be made as mandates. Costs and the feasibility of those strategies was also raised as a concern. Issues were raised related to the transportation assumptions, whether the plan would be utilized as a qualified plan, mitigation for discretionary projects, achieving state targets, and also concerns regarding ecosystems and additional benefits that can come from conservation and sequestration. I will also mention that as of 7:30 this morning, and since release of the final sustainability plan, we've also received an additional, I believe it was 21 or 22 comment letters that have come in, which I believe have all been forwarded onto your board for review. All right, so with the first draft and the revisions that we made, we did give careful consideration to the comments that were received. Really a lot of good feedback, additional strategies that were recommended. So we were able to work through those and make a number of revisions within the sustainability plan. And a full report on those revisions and also responses are provided within the staff report and included within Appendix A of your report. I did just want to briefly mention a couple of key points on clarification and modifications that were made. Again, there was question as to whether or not the sustainability plan would be used as a qualified plan, and at this time, this plan does not serve that function, but certainly could be something that we could consider in a future update. There's additional information that is provided in Chapter 1 related to this concern. Mitigation strategies for discretionary projects. Again, there was a number of recommendations to particular strategies that we would use in the event that a discretionary project is found to exceed greenhouse gas emission thresholds. And so this plan does demonstrate a number of strategies that can be implemented, but we did want to make more clear that the feasibility and the applicability of each of those strategies would be reviewed and determined during environmental review, because again, this plan is not looking to allow discretionary projects to streamline from this review. A lot of questions were raised in regards to, well, then how does this plan even apply during the review of discretionary projects? So we did include a new section in Chapter 1 that clearly describes then how this document would be used during that environmental review process. And the revisions that were made to these strategies did make more clear that the feasibility, again, of those strategies would be considered during environmental review of those projects. In terms of achieving the state's targets, as I mentioned, I did provide some more clarity during this presentation, but we also felt that it was necessary to make a few other revisions throughout the document to help make that more clear. Last, we had comments related to the ecosystems and whether the plan was taking into account the loss of sequestration whether this plan would include or does include looking specifically at the ability to sequester greenhouse gas emissions within various soil types. And did this plan take into account then the loss of vernal pools and other types of lands that have the ability to sequester emissions? So we do make more clear that, again, that type of analysis would take place during the environmental review. Unfortunately, the methodology and a lot of the detail that would be necessary to include a full analysis and account of the potential emission reduction, emission loss from conversion of land types, but as well as the ability to demonstrate the sequestration abilities that we have within our current landscapes. Again, the methodology and data that we would need from the state still has yet to be prepared, but we can certainly include that and consider that within an update to the plan. Comments were also raised if we could add additional consideration for conservation and sequestration. So a number of revisions were made to strategies to help include those benefits as well. All right, so that brings me to the Planning Commission hearing. We did conduct a public hearing with the Planning Commission on December 12th. There were 3 members of the public that did provide public testimony. Testimony in support of the plan focused on a variety of benefits that come from energy conservation and savings and preserving the environment and quality of life. Testimony in opposition was centered on land use changes and conversion of land, including farm and agriculture, that's associated with county actions on other projects. The Commission did take action to recommend that the Board of Supervisors find that the sustainability plan is categorically exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act and the Placer County Environmental Review Ordinance. Commission also took action with a 5-1 vote to recommend that the Board of Supervisors adopt a resolution approving the sustainability plan with one change to add to the implementation strategy actions that focus on innovation incentives. So based on the Commission's recommendations, staff has prepared additional implementation strategies which encourage innovation that results in the reductions of greenhouse gas emissions. And those are outlined in the errata contained in the sustainability plan and within your staff report attachment B. All right, so that brings me to our recommendation today. Again, staff is bringing forward the Planning Commission's recommendation to your board for approval of the following items. The first, to find that the proposed action is categorically exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to Section 15308, actions by regulatory agencies for protection of the environment, and Section 1836, 100, Class 8 of the Placer County Environmental Review Ordinance. Second item here, to adopt a resolution approving the Placer County Sustainability Plan supported by the findings that are provided within your staff report. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you very much, Angel. A very big project and work that you've done. Questions from the board? Cindy?
Thanks, Angel. And I want to thank you for all the public meetings, the MAC meetings. I think I went to as many presentations as anyone here on this through all the various MACs I have. And we didn't receive a lot of public comment at those meetings, but we certainly have received a lot of public comment now. And I just thank you for summarizing those key issues and your responses. One question I have is you talk about annually monitoring and reporting the county's progress toward achieving the goals, but then it's only every 3 to 5 years that we consider updating the plan. Right. And given the changes in technology, the changes we're seeing at the state level, it almost seems like that we're going to be prompted to make those changes sooner rather than later as we get that new information. And I would certainly be one to advocate for that as the state makes a change, that we're monitoring that, we're looking at those impacts as we go forward. And this is on your slide 15, where you said on an annual basis we'll be monitoring the GHG emission reduction targets, but then it says every 3 to 5 years consider updating. Is there anything to hold us back from considering those updates more often or more frequently?
The county can update the sustainability plan as it sees fit. And if I can just provide a clarification, the proposal here is that at a minimum on an annual basis that staff, where we're able to go in and quantify the emission reduction potential from the strategies, that would consist of data collecting and analyzing and then preparing an annual report that would allow us to track the success and benefits from those strategies. In terms of updating the sustainability plan, that could actually include updating the emission inventory or the vulnerability assessment. And so looking at the data that we're able to collect on an annual basis, and then also looking at new regulatory requirements or other local actions, certainly the county may see a benefit to updating the inventory much sooner than 3 years. But there certainly is some flexibility there.
Well, some of the other efforts underway that we'll be working on at the county level will impact this.
Yes.
And in a positive manner. And in some ways, and in, I think, arguably others would say in negative ways, but there's some efforts we're doing that I want to make sure we're taking credit for and measuring and moving forward, because I don't think that's always as known to the public.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question, Angel, and that was we received a number of letters of comment. There was a question about the exemption for subdivisions under 390 units.
Yes.
And would you please just respond to that and how we're addressing those concerns?
Sure. So the comment had raised concern. Actually, we had a number of comments that we received that had indicated that there are exemptions that would be allowed for whether we're analyzing greenhouse gas emissions or that level at which a project would be required to mitigate for greenhouse gas emissions. And if I may clarify, because in the various comment letters there were different numbers that were thrown out there, and I can certainly clear up some of the confusion there. This particular plan, and as the county has done so over several years, we've utilized the Placer County Air Pollution Control District's recommended greenhouse gas thresholds for analyzing and mitigating greenhouse gas impacts. And as part of their efforts in 2016, the district did prepare screening criteria that would inform CEQA practitioners as to the level at which we could expect a project to exceed greenhouse gas thresholds. As part of their efforts, they did provide first screening level criteria as to when a project may exceed thresholds or when an analysis should be prepared. And I'll just also mention that this is done on a project-by-project basis. So certainly one project can come in at one size well below the screening criteria, but because of special circumstances, location, and construction activity, the county could very well still require an air quality analysis. That's fully at the discretion of the county. But as part of their screening criteria, the district has estimated that a development project consisting of 71 residential units, and they provide the screening criteria for other land use types, but I'll focus primarily on the concerns that were raised in the comment letters. At 71 units, the district would expect that there could be a potential exceedance of their screening criteria for thresholds for not just greenhouse gas emissions, but also for criteria pollutants. And so the county will utilize that screening criteria in order to determine when a project should be preparing an air quality analysis, which estimates both criteria pollutants as well as greenhouse gas emissions. The district goes on within their screening criteria to also inform as to what level of project then would be expected to exceed their various thresholds. And for those who may be familiar, the district does use a 3-tier screening process with their analysis. And so 71 units would just simply trigger the need for an analysis to allow us to take a closer look at both construction and operational emissions. There is an efficiency metric then that would allow projects that are exceeding, let's say, 71 residential units, they must comply with the efficiency metric, which simply is complying with Title 24 requirements at the time that they had prepared their thresholds, but also with the implementation of a few strategies, one being whether the project includes wood-burning devices, which often can throw a project well over greenhouse gas thresholds. And last, getting to the number that's most often raised in the comment letters, there appears to be the thought that there's an exemption then for projects that are below the district's screening criteria for their bright line threshold. The district's bright line threshold is at 10,000 metric tons. So projects that exceed this bright line threshold are deemed significant and unavoidable and are required to implement all feasible mitigation. And so with that, and that would be equivalent to 646 units today. And again, that's based on the data that they provided in their thresholds that were adopted by their board in 2016. We could expect then a project that is fewer than 646 units may not necessarily need to implement any additional mitigation. I believe that that's the information that is being expressed in these comment letters as an exemption that is applied. I will share that the county has full discretion as to, first, the thresholds that it utilizes, but then also we have the ability outside of mitigation to include additional conditions of approval or to allow an applicant to build within their project description other types of measures that can help to reduce emissions. I hope I answered your question.
That was helpful. Thank you very much. All right.
I'm sorry,
Gustafson.
I forgot one of my questions. On your slide 5, where we talk about the unincorporated greenhouse gas emissions and the chart, clearly some of the efforts we're taking, and there's a lot of movement on transportation initiatives. Certainly, our most recent efforts to support a free TART service from fund balance that we did. As we move forward and looking at it, it seems to me that really looking at that transportation segment is the area where we can and make the most impact moving forward. And as we look at the state's efforts in that, as well as there's a bi-state effort looking at transportation on I-80 from the Bay Area through Reno and trying to look at that whole corridor. As we look at those efforts, then if we incentivize things like the county funding more into transportation solutions, then we take credit for that in our meeting our targets. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And we're measuring that now to make sure that we're capturing that. Just want to, again, it's one of those examples of things that we're doing, but I want to make sure that we're getting credit for it toward our goals.
Absolutely. There's certainly a lot that the county is already doing, certainly within our own operations. We've got solar panels that are being constructed right now.
Right.
We're looking at future expansion of electric vehicle infrastructure within our county buildings. So there's certainly a lot that the county is doing right now. So any actions that have taken place already, many of those have already been quantified within our inventory. And those types of efforts we want to be able to continue to monitor and then calculate the emission reduction potentials that are coming from those.
Thank you.
All right. With no other questions, we will open up the public hearing and take public comment. So those who'd like to comment, feel free to come on up. And feel free, if there are several of you, I'm guessing there are, you can line up or sit up in the seats up front, make it easier for us all. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Ken Winter. I've been a pastor in Placer County for 30 years with Presbyterian congregations. I'm delighted to be with you this morning, and I thank you for your attention. I was delighted to learn my county was doing a sustainability plan. Wow. And there's a lot to like here. The plan before you is impressive. I've done my best to read most all of it. It's thicker than this. While this plan does a really good job with wildfire mitigation and recovery, it does not do nearly enough to demonstrate how, by our choices on what we build, the way we drive, and other practices, we're actually bringing on climate collapse. And we behave as if we're going to go on forever, and it's not going to happen that way. The plan before you uses figures and standards regarding greenhouse gases that were set before we realized how much more we need to mitigate those in order to stave off climate collapse. And because we are above that limit now, climate collapse is already happening. We may have many difficult changes to make in this county and country, to preserve the chance for a decent life for our generations to come. And we must move quickly. We have but a few years to seriously reduce greenhouse gases, and then it's kind of game over. And suffering will begin in earnest. It's amazing to think that decisions we make today will impact life and death for generations to come. It's kind of overwhelming. This coming slow disaster has made me think of a sudden disaster we've encountered in our country, and it made us make a similar radical change. I'm thinking about the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. In 1941, many U.S. citizens strongly opposed getting involved in international entanglements. World War I was still a fresh memory for them, but the attack on December 7th changed everything. Suddenly, the entire nation pivoted. Millions enlisted in armed services. Many women invented themselves again and began to work for the war effort. And so that kind of sudden transformation is what we're going to be facing today in our county and in our country. And I encourage you to return to the planning department this plan so it might be as strong as the challenges we face. I look forward to the revisions that will come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winter.
William Waters of Auburn. Like the pastor, I was also happy that we were having a sustainability plan. In fact, I did my part to publicize it. I invited Angel to Canyon Keepers, where she had about 75-ish people at least. But this one doesn't go far enough. It's called a sustainability plan, but even with those figures, it's not really sustaining anything. And as shown by your vote for the, quote, Placer Ranch, once again, a false name. It's not a ranch, and it's certainly not anything good for the climate. It's not anything good for the vernal pools. I'm afraid that these voluntary, and you see transportation right up above, residential energy, boom. Everything you did with this so-called sunset plan is counter that. We can only hope that the state does come down and force you people to do something that really is right for the environment. But all of these voluntary things on here, and I'm a building contractor, I wouldn't worry about them. So it may be a start, but it's a sad, slow start. It's not near enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Garabedian for Placer County tomorrow. Well, a lot of hard work went into this. The first time I think I recall standing up before a hearing in this county was 2004, and I have never seen a public involvement effort like this. It's by far the best. It's a model. It's just a model. Of course, it's just a start. Though it's more than just a start, it's highly educational. It's a really great basis for making the necessary improvements to move ahead. About reliance on the county APCD thresholds of significance, I, for a different group, opposed them with expert input about why those thresholds were inadequate and not doing the job. So, and of course, the Board of Supervisors has membership in the APCD, so there's something, a little circular going on there that needs to be changed to rely on something like that. That those thresholds, when they come up again, need to be changed. They're way, way out of date, and set the sizes for subdivisions to be analyzed in a inadequate, should we say, manner. The biggest single project, which I've spoken about before, is the, $500 million, I don't remember the exact cost of it, $4 to $6 billion Placer, 15-mile Placer Parkway, which purpose is to generate development and create a contact between I-80 and 95. This project and the sprawl it will promote is the biggest sprawl project in the history of the Sacramento region. And you are responsible for it. You're going to lobby for it, and that is a grave mistake. Now, this is not all the effort. This is not sustainable, and is by far not a county action plan that we need. A climate action plan.
Hello, I'm Scott Johnson. I live in District 5. This plan makes me feel like we've been sold down the river. That term refers to the threat that slaves labored under if they tried to escape, rebel, or did not work hard enough. They would be sent down the river to a plantation where life expectancy was short. Down the river, slaves were worked to death. In this analogy, the slave owners are the building industry who seek unfair advantage over builders in other counties by gutting this sustainability plan of any requirements that they address sustainability or reduce greenhouse gases. The overseers who enforce the threat are you, the Board of Supervisors. The slaves are us, who are condemned to the worst effects of climate change due to your inaction. When I met with my supervisor, she told me she could not take effective action to address climate change because some of her friends allege that they do not accept the overwhelming scientific findings that climate change has human-caused component. This is selling us down the river. I'm glad the grand jury some of the members are here because I think the corruption involved between the county and the building industry that gutted this plan is worthy of investigation.
My name is Leslie Warren. I'm representing the Alliance for Environmental Leadership, an organization of 14 environmental and civic organizations committed to fair housing and environmental preservation of Placer County. I do want to thank Angel for her outreach to the public. It's been a huge effort. But in some ways, I think you're hearing the frustration from my colleagues. We feel frustrated and used that it was really an exercise that has had the plug pulled out of it, because we've heard through the grapevine as well that the Building Industry Association didn't bother attending the multiple hearings, the workshops, driving distances and staying for hours at public hearings to provide input on the plan. They didn't need to. They meet at a different table, and their influence caused mandatory strategies in the plan that would have effectively reduced greenhouse gas emissions in Placer County to be converted to voluntary strategies, which make our plan one that even the state of California won't recognize for CEQA purposes, which means that the CalGreen Tier Reach Building Code, which our county could have enacted to help us achieve 2030 carbon reduction targets, won't be available to developers. And so the effect of that is an increase in the cost of housing, because under the CalGreen program that we're avoiding with this plan, builders needn't do significant economic analyses as a part of their development process. So those costs will, and the time commitment of will be continue to accrue to the developers, increasing housing costs. So I would ask that Angel do an analysis to see for a different range of development project sizes how the Green Tier program would reduce the cost of housing in the county. Secondly, the fact that the strategies aren't mandatory, we understand was concerned by the development community that the cost of an average home would increase by $9,500 were the strategies made mandatory. So the cost would go up by $9,500, but per home, the greenhouse gas emission would be reduced by 5.57 tons per year. So we're weighing a small cost against a huge social benefit. But when you break down that $9,500 and put it into a 30-year mortgage, that's only increasing, it's only increasing the cost to the homeowner by $41 a month to have all the energy greenhouse gas reduction strategies in that home. And additionally, it will bring that homeowner $80 a month in energy cost savings. So the net benefit to the homeowner is not a less affordable home. It's a more affordable home by $39 a month. And if you multiply that over the term of the mortgage, the homeowner will save over $14,000. And our environment will be, from one household, our environment will be saved from 167 tons of CO2, the equivalent of 96,958 trees sequestering carbon for us. So I ask you to make the strategies in the plan mandatory and direct our building department to adopt the Cal Green Reach Green Tier programs. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
Hi, my name's Annie Bowler. For the record, I agree with everything Leslie Warren said, and so I just want to add on to that some specific points. What I want to take a broader view at what's going on here in our county and our world. I'll begin with some statistics that NASA provides for us. Today's carbon dioxide levels are at 412. I looked on the website this morning. As I hope all of you know, the level for livability on our planet is well below 400, 350, depending on which statistics you go for. The average global temperature has risen 1.9 degrees since 1880. 19 of the 20th warmest years on the planet have been since 2001. Since 2001. In 2012, Arctic seas shrank to the lowest extent on record. Satellite images say that they're finding that the Earth's polar ice sheets continue to lose mass. What does that mean? Global warming. Rising seas. I need to point out that there isn't a lot of debate or disagreement, and I'd really like you to listen to this, sirs. There isn't a lot of disagreement among all climate scientists, including every major scientific organization in America and around the world, that about the causes and effects of climate warming. United States science agencies and organizations all recognize that global warming is a human-caused problem and should be addressed. That's why you were asked to do this study to begin with and set up policies that will protect our county. That's why you were asked to do this, is because of these facts, okay? If we pay attention to what scientists are telling us instead of the fossil fuel industry, which has put much money into keeping oil pumping and our need for oil pumping, the message is clear. Humans are causing the rapid onset of climate change, which is already bringing costly impacts across the globe and here in our own county. Asthma, health issues, heat strokes. It goes on and on. Fire. The best way to stop it is by keeping fossil fuel in the ground and accelerating a transition to 100% renewable energy. I don't need to list for you what's going on around the world. Think about what's happened with fire here locally in our state. What's happened? What's happening in Australia right now? Our seas. But there's just so many problems. So I ask you to look at this plan again. Seriously, I ask each of you to look at this plan again and consider your children, your grandchildren who are going to be inheriting this world. Where's it going to be in 50 years? Please look to the advisors that can help you here. Look to what's happening in the state. I hear you're proposing a tax to go on the November ballot to increase roads, and you're losing money because you've fought with the state. Let's work together so we can all have a healthy world to live in. Thank you. I really appreciate your listening to me, each of you.
Anyone else? Sir?
My name is Don Ravines. I'm with Sierra Foothills Audubon Society. Our mission is to work within Placer and Nevada counties to promote appreciation of protection for birds and their habitats. We are seriously concerned about the climate crisis and its potential effects on birds and all other wildlife. We are pleased that Placer County has proposed a sustainability plan. This letter is to express Sierra Foothills Audubon Society support for the Alliance for Environmental Leadership comments submitted to you as you commence your public consideration of the sustainability plan. In addition, we offer these comments. The DER for this project listed 110 climate action goals. 100 were voluntary, and of the remaining 10 actions provisions that were not voluntary, all of the 10 would only be done if that impact exceeded CEQA requirements. In AEL comments on the DER, it is asked that many of the voluntary strategies be made mandatory. Instead, to our surprise, the strategies that were mandatory are now considered voluntary. It appears that only strategies that are now mandatory are those that are required by state law. 2019 building standards are example. Notice the slide up there mentioned 5 items that were brought up in comments to DIR, one of which was voluntary versus mandatory, and yet the 4 actions that were changed to the plan, none of those talked about voluntary versus mandatory, even though many were changed to voluntary. You all know the old adage that people avoiding action were like ostriches with their heads buried in the sand. But it turned out mother ostriches are not only doing their duty, shifting the eggs in their nests. With our climate crisis, we no longer can bury our heads in the sand and not do our duty to deal with sustainability issues. Sustainability does not mean sustain what we currently are doing. The climate crisis means going beyond what has been done in the past. As Greta Thunberg said in Davos, I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day, and then I want you to act. We ask you to act by reconsidering the strategies in the plan and make mandatory all of the GO strategies that you control, along with community ones that will guarantee clean air, clean water, biodiversity, and reduce carbon emissions. The environment demands it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else after this person? All right, come on up. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Lisa Howard. I live in Rockland. I don't have any prepared statement. I'm basically here because I'm a mom. I have 2 kids, and I worry about their future. All of us here are talking about these numbers and these charts and everything, but what we're really talking about is the future of our children. When I read information about what's going to happen in our county and our state in the future, it worries me. Because I want my kids to be able to enjoy the kind of life that I have enjoyed. We're Californians. We love being outside. I take my kids to Tahoe, and they love the snow. And I look at what's going to happen to the Tahoe region, where we're not going to have snow. I look at what that means for the water in our state. We're projected to have 2/3 less water from the Sierra snowpack by the year 2100, with more people. We all know how the last drought affected us, and droughts coming up could last 10 years or longer. 10 years more, less Sierra snowpack, more people. We're looking at 1 day a year by the mid-century where our county will have temperatures that exceed the current heat index. Who wants to go outside when it's that hot? I don't. I already hate it. It's like we hit 105, and I'm like, no way, I'm not going outside. And we might think, sure, we'll just jump in the swimming pool. But if there's no water, what are we going to do? these statistics aren't about buildings or money or anything. It's about quality of life for all of us and our families. And I thank the people who've done this, because I know it's hard and you have to balance everything. But more than anything, this is a quality of life issue. And the charts that we looked at, they already show that this plan is not quite going to get us to where the state says we need to be to 2030. And it's definitely not going to get us to where we need to be by 2050. So I just ask the board to please consider the future and think about making these questions or the rules stronger, mandatory, and getting us to where we need to be by 2050 for our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. All right, anyone else for public comment? And I don't think the person in Tahoe is here for public comment. I can see that person in the audience. All right. So with that, I will close the public comment and bring it back to our board. Supervisor Yoler?
Yes, just quickly. Unfortunately, I do have to step back out again. I'm a little late for something that I had to do. But just my comments. Since the EPA reported that in 2017, the United States was 13% below our 2005 greenhouse gas emissions levels. Meanwhile, Fortune magazine in December last year analyzed that China from 2000 to 2018 has tripled their greenhouse gas output. They burn over half of the coal consumed worldwide, and they announced in November that they are going to develop one coal-fired plant that burns as much as all of the EU coal generation capacity. I believe the plan that we have in front of us is Placer County's fair share to the problem, but while we have international neighbors who are not doing anything, and in fact going in the right direction, we could shut down Placer County's economy and have zero impact on total output. So I support this plan as it's presented to the Board of Supervisors, and I apologize I have to step out at this time.
All right, thank you. Supervisor Weigand.
Thanks, Bonnie. A couple of comments. Angel, first of all, thanks for the great work over the last couple of years, and particularly I'll compliment again the outreach. I know that was a strong commitment by you. And you've heard me say a couple of these things before, so bear with me, if you will, in terms of my public comments. Noting Placer County's role, if you will, and having and providing some perspective for that, when you look at some of our better efforts, which of course my bias includes Placer County Conservation Plan, but also we have an extraordinary Department of Health and Human Services. As we move forward, I'm looking forward to the reports back every year and the data that we collect with an eye on how we can be a template, an example, how we can set some standards. And I'll go through a little therapy and give you some examples of the kinds of things that I've seen. But I'm so old. I've been around for so long. Then we first started to get involved with the Placer County conservation work and vernal pool management. The regulatory agencies essentially wanted vernal pools to be set aside and preserved and not touched. And there was controversy around what the best management scheme was for them. Now it's consensus, which was considered to be extreme biology 20 and 30 years ago, to require that they be grazed, and the larger the animal that grazes them, the biology indicates that it's better for the species that reside in the vernal pools. So as it relates to things like sequestration, greenhouse gas emissions, and our open spaces that'll be on the valley floor, there's been a lot of work in the forest, but there's not very much work, as I understand, as it relates to our grasslands and greenhouse gas issues. And we're going to be constantly dealing with trade-offs like preserving the open space is a good thing that will help relative to greenhouse gas emissions. But cattle are rich producers of methane gas, which the experts tell me are the worst greenhouse gas emissions that are in our inventories. Also, one quick question, pretty sure I know the answer, but on this slide where you talk about agriculture and forest management, those numbers, is it correct to state that they do not include reductions in catastrophic forest fires? It's really just the current agricultural and forest management practices existing today, correct?
Correct. My understanding is that it does include efforts as it relates to biomass measures that we're currently implementing. But if I'm understanding correctly, and if I could just rephrase your question, you're asking if the inventory is including emissions as a result of wildfire. Is that correct?
Catastrophic wildfire.
Catastrophic wildfire.
That's the phrase that I've come to like the most.
And those emissions are not included within the inventory.
Correct. And in that, air pollution is one of my committee assignments, and I've spent some time, I'm not a technical expert, and I have to rely on technical experts to collect the data for me, but I've been told by experts that as it relates to criteria air pollutants, as well as greenhouse gas emissions, the richest investments, the best reductions for the dollar invested is to manage our forest in what's considered to be contemporary work. So we're doing in partnership, Brett Story comes to us every now and then to give us updates, the work we're doing with the Water Agency, Middle Fork Project, and being positioned to amplify that kind of work, collect the data, articulate the benefits of the data that include, it's my understanding, that a treated forest without regard to a forest fire or not does a much better job of sequestering greenhouse gas emissions. So Brett told us last time he was here that UC is starting to do work as it relates to the Middle Fork forest management treatment that includes, I think, things like water quality and quantity that will be improved as a result of the treatment. I'm not sure if it includes greenhouse gas emissions, but if not, some of the money opportunities you were talking to, we could maybe use that as a template for amplifying the data collection of the work we do. I'll point also to, with the conservation plan, we already have a signed memorandum with the William Jessup University, where they'll be providing a lot of assistance to us, interns, but also data collection, scientific processing and analyses of that data, which is critically important. It'll focus a lot on our vernal pool valley floor properties because that's where the PCCP is targeted. And the current discussion is more to create a baseline work as to what existing biological, et cetera, standards are out there, but amplifying maybe, again, the greenhouse gas issue into that and then expanding that more in the county is, I think, an opportunity. And I'll finish with the real therapy you've heard me talk about. It's my understanding, talking to experts, that, and I'm connecting directly to Kirk's comments because they have merit as it relates to the portion and the perspective in having an intelligent strategy moving forward that is cost effective but accomplishes the goal of trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So worked closely with the Sierra Business Council on this issue. They are voracious about wanting to see our forest management enhanced more intelligently with much bigger investments. But as I have read that with regards to the cap and trade policies that exist in California, the monies that have been invested, there was a deal with Governor Brown created so that 20% of those revenues would go to the bullet train. I've been told by air quality experts that there were never any studies done as to the greenhouse gas emission reductions that would occur as a result of that benefit. Most recent thing I read is that 40% of those monies collected to date have been invested in the bullet train without any calculations as to the benefit to the climate gas emissions. So again, in Placer County, I like to hope that we can actually target, again, specific reductions, measure benefits and those kinds of things, set an example as to an intelligent strategy that talks about the cost effectiveness of these kinds of investments, and maybe get some attention that would result in some dramatic changes in the way state, federal policy is managed as relates to our forests, but just the question of climate change in and of itself. So thanks. I feel a lot better.
Finished for now.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Robert. Supervisor Holmes.
First of all, Robert, you're not that old.
Thank you.
But I do want to pick up on your comment about the forest management that we're doing with the Middle Fork project. The French Meadows Restoration Project is a model that we're using, the county has done. It's getting statewide recognition and national recognition. And it's a model that other counties and states are going to be looking at as far as cleaning that forest to protect us from wildfire, protect our watershed. So I think that's a great start, and we need to move forward with that and promote that as much as possible. Also, Governor Newsom has given us a lot of resources for the shaded fuel break project from Cape Horn down to the American River Canyon, the American River Bridge, or the Forest Hill Bridge. That's a huge project. Those are the things that we're trying to do to mitigate wildfire in Placer County, but it needs to be done statewide and nationally as well. So, Angel, I just want to thank you and your staff for the hard work and how many meetings you've been at, and I've been at several of them, and doing the hard work that it takes to get this to this level. But I also want to thank all the people that have commented, because your passion is well received. It makes me stop and think about how I recognize this item and how I move forward with it. It's really, really an issue that needs to be addressed. Maybe it's not bold enough, but it's a start. And it's a plan that we can adapt to. And as things arise, there'll be other things that pop up while we're working on this plan. And we'll have to adapt to it. And so it's a tough lift. It's a lot of work. But I want to assure you that I'm going to be engaged in it throughout the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Holmes. Supervisor Gustafson.
Again, thank you, Angel and staff, for all the work that you've done on this. I know nothing that we ever do up here is perfect, and nothing that we work on at the staff level ever gets everything right. We work with older data, and then there's new data that comes in just as we adopt the last plan, and we have to make amendments. I, too, appreciate the comments from the public. Climate change, to me, is very real, and I want us to do everything we can possibly do. I stopped short on the mandatory because I don't think we have the support up here to make these measures mandatory, but what I can do in my role here is to work on incentives, because it isn't about new development. That is what's existing now, and that's what we need to change. That means each and every one of us needs to make changes, personal changes in our life, and I try to practice that. I'm not perfect. I try to avoid those, and I try to do many things to make this world better for my children and my grandchildren as well. So I take it very seriously that the county has invested, and I've been so impressed with what my predecessors have done in the leadership in preserving land, acquiring and preserving land. I mean, you didn't mention that, but I am so pleased at the things that you've done. And when I look at our parks and our public lands that we've preserved from development, dealing with the transportation and the strong support I got in getting that TART system free for 2 years. It's already seen a 32% growth in ridership, and we know those measures can happen, so we can incentivize the behavior we want versus requiring that. Many people here want us to mandate, and though what we're not hearing from is the huge group of people who don't want government to mandate anything in their lives, and I hear from them almost every night on my Facebook account. I'm learning of the joys of this job, but I do believe this is a starting point, and it isn't the final, and we can revise it, and as new ideas come forward and mandates that we can implement that are complementary to state and not duplicative of state mandates, I think we need to do that. And so I'll stand by those of you who want to bring forward future ideas for more regulation and listen to those ideas and see what we can work out. But in the meantime, I'm going to continue to push on incentives and things that we can do proactively to get people to make choices in their life, but it's their choice. And we hope they'll join us in that recognition that we do need to make some changes if we want the best for our children and grandchildren. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I appreciate what you've all shared, and I don't want to reiterate it. Appreciate the comments and staff, the work.
Can I say
yes,
another
go ahead.
Serving on the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, there's been several projects that we're trying to relieve pressure on the highways and freeways. One is the third track, Union Pacific to Roseville, and we've had the money set aside. We've had the appropriation, and we had the planning all set, and then UP has changed their mind. We're still working on that, but these are incremental plans that we can do to get people out of their cars and take public transportation. The Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority, the train is the third most highest ridership in the nation, and that includes the Eastern Corridor. Those are some of the things we're doing. We're also going to try to put some auxiliary lanes for bus traffic, and that as we move forward. So there's all kinds of incremental things that we're trying to do to implement this strategy, and that transportation thing is what's really needs to be worked on.
Great, thank you. So I think that the plan has put together a number of strategies which are terrific, and I appreciate, Cindy, your comments about incentives versus mandates. We come from a community where mandates, we look at the mandates, and there have been some good mandates because we've had increased reduction for greenhouse gases, right? 20% over baseline from 2005, which has demonstrated that our air quality is a whole lot better than it was many years ago, and that's terrific. But there's that balance between the cost effectiveness and what it ultimately costs our ratepayers for a small benefit. And so I do appreciate the suggestion about incentivizing people and just encouraging change of behavior, which I think many of us have changed our behaviors, and that's a continual process of teaching people different ways of doing things which will save energy and address greenhouse gases. And so I'm grateful too that we can adapt this plan. Right? We'll continue to look at the data, and we'll continue to look at, is it working, and are there changes that we need to make? And so I think this is a really good baseline, a really good starting point moving forward. We've done a lot of work to this point. So I am supportive of this plan as it's been proposed. So if there are no other comments, do we have a motion? Let's see. No, actually, Angela already read the entire motion previously, so we do. I think that we can do a roll call, but I need a motion and a second, then we'll do a roll call.
I'll move approval. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Ayyett?
Yes.
Holmes?
Yes.
Gustafson? Gore?
Yes. All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. Appreciate the hard work and all of you commenting. With Supervisor Euler not quite back, he did want to participate in item 4A, and so we are going to, we're going to take a few department items because I have a feeling 5A will go long as well. So if we can move to item 6A, which is the department item, it's Health and Human Services, and hopefully they hear us in the staff room. This is the revenue allocation agreement with the California Department of Healthcare Services for Health Enrollment Navigation, and there she is. Perfect.
Ready to go.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, Board and Chairperson Gore. My name is Amanda Sharp. I'm your Human Services Director for Placer County Health and Human Services. And joining me today is Mary Barker. She's a Program Supervisor for Outreach Activities at our Human Services Division. Today I'd like to request action to approve a revenue allocation, which I always feel good about bringing to the board. We have money that we would like to ask to be able to bring into the department. This is for a health enrollment navigation project. This 2-year project would be funded in the amount of $1,180,988 between January 1 of this year, 2020, and December 31st of 2021. Placer County currently provides Medi-Cal health enrollment navigation services with 7 community-based organizations under contract. These organizations provide on-site application assistance. They attend community events, perform outreach at health fairs, community meetings, schools, shelters, food banks, etc. And their efforts reach low to moderate income families, homeless individuals, hard to insure individuals, domestic abuse victims, and other uninsured individuals who may be eligible for health enrollment. The services that we provide are in multiple languages and serve those with language or literacy issues that may increase their barriers to accessing insurance. Our funded partners reach across most of the areas of Placer County, from the Tahoe area to Auburn, Lincoln, Forest Hill, and Roseville. But this additional funding would create a new opportunity to increase our health enrollment navigation and would allow Placer County Human Services to increase our efforts to reach lower income communities like Sheridan, Colfax, and Alta, as well as to broaden outreach to people with disabilities, people who are seniors, folks recently released from jail, and to expand our efforts to reach those with limited English proficiency. The program would fund new trainings to community-based organizations to help them better understand how Medi-Cal and health insurance program eligibility works, and to promote the benefits of having and retaining health coverage. Also to remove barriers to enrollment. We would like to work with program application assisters to help us with potential applicants. Our objectives will be to increase our partnerships with community groups, so increase the number of partner organizations that we work with, to increase awareness through print and email materials and social media, in outlets and in community distribution, and we'll make stronger connections among those released from jail to ensure they have health access as quickly as possible. Further, the County Human Services will present to service clubs, networks, committees, etc. about health coverage in California and Placer County, and we hope to increase enrollment in health coverage by 10,000 individuals, which is a pretty lofty goal. This, we believe, can be accomplished in the period of the funding by ensuring compliance with annual renewals. One issue is that people allow their renewals to drop off. So if we retain them on insurance, that's better for everybody to have retained health benefits. Educating human services customers receiving CalFresh about their potential eligibility for health benefits and healthcare options, and working with community partners to educate and assist in the enrollment process. So we've submitted a budget and a work plan, and when I say we, I mentioned Mary Barker earlier. This is largely a result of her efforts in writing for the application. A budget and work plan to the state of California, the Department of Healthcare Services, DHCS, and we're selected as a county to receive funding for the project. Funding is 50% state and 50% federal funds through AB 74. There are no county general funds required for the project. I'd like to ask to please consider approval to receive the revenue allocation for a health enrollment navigation project. This funded project would be in the amount of $1,180,988, and if needed, we would make any budget revisions to be included in the fiscal year 2021 department proposed budget. Although I may not have all the answers, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have on this project.
Thank you. Any questions from board members? We'll open this up to the public. Any comments from the public? We will close public comment, and we have a motion to approve from Holmes, second Gustafson, and all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. And no opposed. All right, motion carries. Congratulations. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And we'll move on to item 7A, information technology. There he is, the Microsoft Enterprise Software Licensing Agreement with Dell Marketing LP of Round Rock, Texas.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Jarrett Thiessen. I'm Placer County CIO. I've got Mike Lewis and John Fan with me. Mr. Lewis is the IT manager over the infrastructure and customer service team. Mr. Fan is the IT supervisor over the infrastructure team. They're here to help me if you have any questions at the end. So we're here today to request your approval for the award of a 3-year agreement with Dell Marketing LP to provide Microsoft Enterprise licensing to the County of Placer, utilizing Riverside County's statewide competitively awarded contract in the not-to-exceed amount of $2,935,064. The 3-year contract period would begin February 1st, 2020, and run through January 31st of 2023. Funding is already included in the IT department's 1920 final budget and in our 2021 proposed budget. It would also be requested in our 21-22 budget if approved today. We're also requesting your approval to authorize the purchasing manager to sign all required documents related to this agreement. Placer County currently utilizes Microsoft software products on our desktop computers and servers that reside on the county's network, standalone computers, as well as services hosted in the cloud by Microsoft. These products include Office 365, the Windows operating system, SQL database, and other miscellaneous Office products. Maintaining an enterprise agreement with Microsoft provides Placer County with the flexibility to continue to efficiently manage its computer environment and meet requirements for the county's identified cloud computing strategies. On December 16th, 2017, your board approved our current 3-year agreement for licensing of Microsoft products. That agreement will expire at the end of this month on January 31st. The Information Technology Department evaluated several alternatives to procure the most cost-effective enterprise agreement to meet the county's needs and determined that the cost under the Riverside County's master enterprise agreement are significantly less than we would be able to procure if we went under our own agreement. The Riverside County agreement is available to other public agencies, and the procurement policy permits the use of other government agencies' competitively awarded agreements without further bidding by Placer County. Therefore, the IT department solicited competitive quotations from the top 3 most competitive firms under the Riverside agreement and determined that Dell Marketing was the lowest cost and is being recommended as a selected vendor. So with that, I'd ask for your approval of this 3-year agreement and be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? My only comment is I should have gone into the IT business. Let's open this up to the public, and we'll close public comment. And what is the will of the board?
Second.
All right, motion by Holmes, second by Wygant. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you for your hard work. And we'll move on to item 8A. This is the Auburn Ravine Forest Main Replacement Project, mitigated neg deck, and plans and specifications.
Good morning.
Hi there.
Chair Gore, board members. My name is Walter Schwall, Senior Civil Engineer with Public Works Environmental Division. So we're here to present the next steps of the department's project to replace Auburn Ravine Sewer Force Main. So we're going to be asking you to approve and adopt the initial study and the mitigated neg deck. And after approval of that, then we'll ask you to approve the plans and specifications and authorize staff to advertise the project for bids. So I'm just going to turn it over to Brandon, who's the project manager, to complete the presentation.
Good morning, Chair Gore, members of the board. My name is Brandon Thurber, work in environmental engineering. I wanted to give a little background on this project. So the Auburn Ravine Force Main, the existing pipe, was constructed back in 1959, is located in Sewer Maintenance District Number 1 here in North Auburn. Structural deficiencies were identified in the force main, which require the Auburn Ravine lift station to operate at a reduced flow and pressures. The Auburn Ravine Force Main Replacement Project is needed to avoid pipe failures and allow the lift station to pump at its intended design capacity. Back on April 9th, 2019, your board authorized the award of the design contract to Water Systems Consulting, Inc., or WSC, to prepare the final design and bidding documents. Since that meeting, staff has worked on several items. The first being staff worked with Douglas Environmental to prepare the initial study and mitigated negative declaration in compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act. Upon approval of the requested action, staff requests that your board make the following 5 findings based on this document. First being the initial study and mitigated negative declaration were each prepared as required by law. 2, there is no substantial evidence in record as a whole that the project, as mitigated, may have significant effect on the environment. And 3, the mitigated negative declaration as adopted for the project reflects the independent judgment and analysis of the County of Placer, which has exercised overall control and direction in its preparation. 4, the mitigation plan and mitigation monitoring program prepared for this project is approved and adopted. And lastly, number 5, the custodian of records of the documents which constitute the record of these proceedings is Placer County Director of Public Works, located at 3091 County Center Drive here in Auburn. Secondly, staff has also worked with WSC to finalize the design plans and the technical specifications and incorporate mitigation measures for the replacement of the Auburn Ravine force main, and intends to proceed with bidding the project for construction upon your board's approval. In order to proceed, staff is requesting the following. First being approve and adopt the initial study and mitigated negative declaration for the Auburn Ravine force main replacement project, and direct staff to file the notice of determination and acknowledge the 5 previously discussed items. And followed by approving the plans and specifications for the Auburn Ravine force main replacement project with an estimated construction cost of $2.52 million, and authorize the Director of Public Works or designee to advertise for construction bids. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
All right, thank you very much. No questions. I would say that this is almost as expensive as IT, except that we don't replace sewers as often as we do software, so still stick with the IT business. All right, let's move into public comment. And seeing none, we'll close public comment. What is the will of the board?
Move approval. Second.
All right, motion by Wygant, second by Holmes. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice Jerry Garcia tie, by the way. Okay, now we're going to get back to our timed items, and we're going to move to item 4A, Community Development Resources Agency, the Placer County Conservation Program Joint Exercise of Powers Agreement. Gentlemen, welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board, ladies and gentlemen. I am Greg McKenzie, your Placer County Conservation Program Administrator. Nice to be here this morning with an item that has taken some time to get to. It's the first of hopefully several items we'll be bringing forward to your board for consideration in the not too distant future. We did on this item have one letter submitted into the record, came in yesterday from Mr. George Kammer. I see he is in the audience today and may wish to address your board on this item. I'm also joined this morning by Chris Beal with Resources Law Group, who is our outside counsel for the conservation program and was the drafter of the JPA agreement. Has been helping us out with a whole host of items on the conservation program over the years. Also, Lauren Clark, who hopefully many of you recognize. I took and have tried to since fill his shoes upon his retirement, but he's come back to help us. He works for Salix Consulting here in Auburn. So the item I have before you this morning is a request for you to adopt a resolution approving the joint exercise of powers agreement, creating the Placer Conservation Authority, and authorizing the chair to execute the same, authorizing county council to file the notice of agreement with the Secretary of State upon execution of the agreement, and authorizing the county executive officer to do and perform everything necessary to carry out the purpose of the resolution. So why a joint power agency and why now? Let me give you a little context as to where we're at in the process. So as you recall, last summer, roughly, we took the Placer County Conservation Program, so the Habitat Conservation Plan, Natural Communities Conservation Plan, County Aquatic Resources Program, the draft, public review draft EIR and EIS under CEQA and NEPA, went out for public review for 60 days. We received roughly 49 comments and have been working with all of our state and federal agency partners to respond to those comments. So that involves most all of them providing feedback into what those responses to the comments look like and getting consensus with them around those, which can be difficult because we are working with the U.S. EPA and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Corps of Engineers and National Marine Fisheries Service, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, State Water Board, so a whole host of characters to bring together to coalesce around a set of responses to comments. So we think we're just about at the finish line of building that consensus with them on what those comments say. We're also making edits to the plan in response to public comments received on the plan and on the EIR, EIS as a function of that process. And so we expect here very shortly, I've actually given them all until this Friday to provide us feedback on red lines and strikeouts. And if they are all good with that, given that we spent multiple meetings all day in a windowless conference room with live edits up on a screen, we should all be good. Assuming we are, hopefully mid-next month we will have the EIR, EIS, the PCPs, the Habitat Conservation Plan, Natural Communities Conservation Plan, County Aquatic Resources Plan, ready to go into the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services Solicitor, Secretary's Office, the Department of Interior, and then finally into the Federal Register for another 30-day listing. Once we are there, my plan is to go to the Planning Commission for their consideration and hopefully a recommendation to your board. And at the end of that 30 days, come to your board for your consideration and a request for adoption of the program and all the ordinances and everything that comes along with it. So, given where we're at in the process, why now and why a JPA? Why now? The JPA would actually be receiving the same permits that we, the county, and our other permittees, the City of Lincoln, Placer County Water Agency, and South Placer Regional Transportation Planning Agency would be receiving, because the JPA has actions that would need to carry out in the future that would require those same permits. And so it needs to be put in place, at least administratively, such that it can receive those permits upon permit issuance by the state and federal agencies. So why a joint power agency? Our two ad hoc committee members from your board, the rest of the ad hoc committee made up of the other permittees, looked at various different government organization strategies for the conservation program, decided that a joint power agency was the best governance strategy. It's basically comprised of two or more public agencies to exercise any power in common to those agencies. So in this case, what are those authorities? So why a JPA? What will that JPA be doing? So it will take on the conservation side of the Placer County Conservation Program. It will be charged with receiving fees from the permittees, taking those fees, going out, acquiring lands for conservation, acquiring conservation easements for conservation and agricultural easements. It will restore, preserve, enhance, maintain, monitor, work with universities on directive research. It'll do a whole host of things, including working with all the permittees to make sure they're implementing the plan correctly in conformance and basically assisting them in that process of identifying covered activities and how they relate to the conditions on covered activities and avoidance and minimization measures. So that entity will take on the lion's share of implementation for conservation under the program. How will the JPA be funded? It will be funded by a percentage allocation from the fee program that will come in to take care of it administratively, but also to serve to do all the things I just mentioned, to acquire, preserve, protect the reserve system through that 50-year period. So, joint power agency requires more than one entity. So the resolution filing of the notice requires the City of Lincoln also do the same in order for the resolution to become effective and for County Council to file the notice. So we have communicated with the city, and they are, as we know today, still cooperating with us and moving forward in that direction to bring it forward to fruition. Placer County Water Agency and South Placer Regional Transportation Authority both said we don't need seats on the JPA. They preferred that the county and the city maintain those, having common land use authority, police power, and so they will remain engaged. But as currently proposed and drafted, 2 board members from this board, 1 City of Lincoln council member is the JPA makeup as proposed today. So, adoption of a resolution forming a joint power agency. At this point, as I said, administratively, we need to get it set up such that it can, in the future, assuming the PCP is adopted and permitted, receive those permits. Therefore, adoption of this resolution is not a project under the California Environmental Quality Act. Approval of the agreement and filing of the notice with the Secretary of State does not commit the county to any specific action or project that could cause a physical impact on the environment, and instead is an organizational activity that will not result in physical changes to the environment. With that, we are here to answer questions that you may have. Would request that you open the item to receive public comment and approve the resolution approving the agreement, authorizing county council to file the notice, and authorizing the CEO to carry out the purpose of the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Greg. Appreciate it. How you keep track of all of that, I will never understand. With that, I don't see any questions from board members. We will open this up to the public. Any comments from the public?
Mike Garabedian, Placer County Tomorrow, sympathize with the question of keeping track of everything from the public point of view, and this hearing is an unfortunate example. As was completely and fully described to you, the public has not received the comments, the response to their comments yet. So this is entirely premature to be setting up the authority. The authority is the single most important future structure to deal with implementation of the PCCP. And talking about 2 people from your board and 1 from the City of Lincoln, all of them recallable on a moment's notice. What kind of a structure is that? The structure really needs something that's codified in county code or law. The choice of a JPA may be entirely wrong for this. So let's look at a little about what we're talking about here. So the South County Regional Transportation Agency, it's not on the authority, but it has under this agreement, it has the ability to enforce its own permit. So the Public Advisory Committee is a softball. Also, as I mentioned, they're recallable. It doesn't have a structure like you see in some other habitat conservation plan combined with California natural communities conservation plans. Really, I think the best thing you could do is to put this off so you can yourselves consider the alternatives to this. I mean, there was public involvement. The stakeholder group threw out. Some people allegedly disappeared and came back. But this key question is really too important for you not to consider what the structure should be and how it should be nailed down for not to be changed so readily. So what should be done? The key thing is to have a mechanism that works. How to do that? Maybe this is the time to start consideration of that, but to expect the public to have the confidence of supervisors, 2 supervisors and a city council person, what science or environmental or land use or background may they have, but this is all about that. So, and what will be the input to these decisions? How will it be managed by the different agencies and so forth? So, this really shouldn't be acted on today, and you should take it under careful consideration.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else like to make a comment? Yes, sir.
Chairperson Gore, members of the Board of Supervisors, I'm George Kammerer, here representing the Lincoln Village 3 Landowners Association, and we've submitted a letter into the record already, but have another copy for today. And I just wanted to say, this is the beauty of public hearings and public participation. You get to hear both sides of the story from the public. I'm here on the opposite side of this issue from your last participant here from the public, and want to let you know that my clients have participated in this process on the PCCP, not as long as many have, but for a considerable amount of time, since about 2012, and have seen the process progress quite a bit. And initially, my clients who have plans as the largest landowners in Village 3 to develop most of their property pursuant to the Lincoln 2050 General Plan, were not supportive of the PCCP, but through extensive discussions, not just by us, but a number of other landowners, folks from all sides of the spectrum, the plan has evolved over time quite a bit and addressed a number of issues that we felt weren't addressed adequately early on. And Lauren knows he's been involved with a lot of this, of course Chris too, over the years, that we've just been one participant among many. But we've come to the point where my clients are very strong supporters of the PCCP. They've been waiting for this. They see it as a ideal avenue for allowing for development of their property to go forward and go forward in a very responsible way. And so for that, we want to urge you to approve the JPA, adopt the recommendation from your staff today without delay. We've waited a long time to see the PCCP get to completion and to see it finally be implemented, which would be a definite benefit to us and I think a number of other similarly situated landowners here in the county. So we're just here to urge your approval today and hope that you will without further delay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other
Great.
public comments? Yes, sir.
And I'll submit another copy as Megan. Thank you.
William Waters, Auburn again. I want to say that I like this plan in general. Like Michael, I wish there was more stringent oversight in public. I have great admiration for both Lauren and Greg, and if they're on board with it, it's probably as good as it's going to get. Now, talking with Lauren in past, we wish that basically these sort of agreements could be reached for all of the county. So you have, the builders have more knowledge and so forth. And specifically that all offsets of land, habitat, etc., be forced to be in Placer County. Do not allow any developers to mitigate outside of Placer County. This will help keep the recreation industry strong. This is exactly what we need in county. So please extend any of the good parts about this to the rest of the county. And please definitely make sure all land mitigations are in Placer County. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Waters. Any other comments? All right, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the board. Greg, did you want to follow up on anything that was stated?
I'll look at Chris if there's any question relative to the timing of the JPA. As mentioned, the JPA must be formed, and in most other plans, they're formed even much further in advance than we have here. Obviously, through the stakeholder committee process over the past 19 years, representatives from the Sierra Club, Audubon, development community, land trusts, whole host of interest groups have been engaged in that and aware of the path we've chosen to go with the Joint Power Agency. But yes, from my perspective, my recommendation to you all at this point in time, the JPA formation is necessary in order to be formed timely to receive permits at the end of the process.
Right, and once this process ultimately is wrapped up, finalized, approved, hopefully, then it allows moving forward quickly so that we can move forward with projects that have been waiting for this plan to get finished up. Any comments from board members, questions, conversation? Short comments.
I think
Brief
maybe
comments.
Robert needs some more therapy or not. 19, how many years have you worked on it?
Therapy for me would be to move approval.
So would you like to do that, Mr. Wygant?
Move approval.
All right, and a second from Supervisor Holmes. And it looks like I need a roll call vote, please.
Wygant?
Yes.
Holmes?
Yes.
Bueller? Gustafson? Gore?
Yes, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate all of your hard work, and we'll move forward. And with that, let's move to item 5A, and it is the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association proposed multi-year contract. And looks like we have our Tahoe folks in attendance as well. So here we go, Erin.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Erin Casey here with the County Executive Office, here to present this item to you. I'd first like to start off by thanking members of the Resort Association staff who I've been working with over the last several months to develop this agreement. Also, County Counsel Karen Schwab has been very helpful and has provided a lot of good guidance and direction to us as we have worked to pull this contract together. So I want to recognize her and thank her for that assistance. Presentation overview, I'd like to briefly go over the county partnership with the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association, provide a brief summary of the Tourism Master Plan funding history, transient occupancy tax in Eastern Placer County, the proposed Tourism Business Improvement District for the Eastern Placer County area, proposed multi-year agreement, provide you with a little bit of details and some highlights of this agreement, the T-bid schedule, and then requested board action. The county and the Resort Association, as I think you're all aware, have a long-standing partnership that began in the early 90s. The Resort Association was created in 1995 and implemented a destination marketing program. It also recommended infrastructure and transportation investment in Eastern Placer County. The initial or first tourism master plan was developed in 1996, and it guided the Resort Association's work and the county investment in that transportation and infrastructure. The plan was updated in 2004 and 2015, and the 2015 document continues to guide both the Resort Association as well as the work that we do with the CAP Committee and other public groups on the investment of TOT dollars in Eastern Placer County. The countywide rate for TOT is 8%. There's a 2% rate increase for the North Lake Tahoe collection area. That was passed by voters in 1996 and reauthorized in 2002 and then 2012. The additional funds generated from that 2% increase have been invested in a number of projects over the years, including projects like trails, transportation, or expanded transit service. I also want to point out the free transit or free TART service that Supervisor Gustafson mentioned earlier that your board approved is in part funded with transient occupancy tax dollars. Visitor serving facilities, recreation, including parks as well. That 2% increase does sunset in 2022, and it is incorporated in this agreement, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. What's important to talk about here also is the funding gap to implement the Tourism Master Plan. The Tourism Master Plan developed in 2015 does identify close to $100 million in needed funds to support Tier 1, Tier 2, or the capital projects that the community identified as high priorities. That's a significant amount of funding. But in recent year, in 2019, staff did a review of the projects. A lot of the projects that had been funded earlier on through grant programs that were tied directly to the Tourism Master Plan, included that in a long list and got some estimates for those project costs to get a better understanding of what the funding gap really was. Was it still $100 million? Was it greater than that? And it turns out that based on that analysis, we're actually looking at more like a $200 million, over a $200 million gap to fully implement a lot of the projects and programs that are called out in the Tourism Master Plan. from 2015. Those costs may continue to increase. This is over an 8-year period. The Tourism Master Plan has been developed for an 8-year period, and so that's what we looked at when we assessed the projects and those costs to develop and update that list. And that list does not include housing. So that gives you an idea. We have a significant gap. We know affordable or workforce housing is very important to our community, and that is not included in this list. So the point is, there's a big gap, and we need to close that gap so that we can support the tourism economy of North Lake Tahoe and implement the community priorities. And that is what this agreement is in part designed to do. The Resort Association, to take a step back, contracted with Civitas Advisors last year. Civitas is a consulting firm that works with many agencies in California to develop tourism business improvement districts, or TBIDs. Civitas analyzed data from several business industries, including lodging, retail, restaurants, and recreation. And the objective of that analysis was to determine the feasibility of a TBID in North Lake Tahoe. Just to provide you with a few details on TBIDs, there have been 109 formed throughout the state of California, so it's not a new idea. It's formed through the Property and Business Improvement District Law of 1994. Businesses in a TBID are assessed, and in order to form a TBID, it requires a 50 plus 1% of the assessed businesses, a yes vote, prior to that formation. In advance of that, a budget is developed, and it includes a management district plan, which really provides additional detail on how the district will operate and where the funds will be invested. The Resort Association has been working with Civitas as well as resorts and business partners to, one, assess the feasibility of the TBID, but two, to really develop this management district plan and the TBID budget. After Civitas did that initial work, the Resort Association began meeting with business representatives in the community to better understand what the response would be to an assessment like this. Many TBIDs are placed or assessed in the lodging sector. There are other TBIDs in the state. One example is Mammoth, where assessments go beyond that into retail, recreation, and even lift tickets at ski resorts. The Resort Association was interested in an approach that looked very similar to that because we're already collecting a fair amount of TOT from the resort industry. It's important to sort of spread that out across other industries in the community so that other groups are paying into investment for the tourism economy in North Lake Tahoe. The response from the business community has been positive. What's really important about this TBID is it will generate, with the current budget, could generate over $5 million. Now, this would be additional revenue for the community. We talked about that funding gap. It's significant. So bringing in additional revenue is important. So that was appealing to the businesses that the Resort Association met with. But some of the questions that came up included, well, if that revenue comes in, what happens to that transient occupancy tax that's currently funding the Resort Association contract and some of the other investments in our community? Because the assessment revenues could replace that transient occupancy tax that funds the Resort Association's contract. And so it was important to the business community that were some assurances that the TOT that's being freed up by the assessment that would come through is going to continue to be invested in Eastern Placer County and would also be invested in housing and transportation initiatives, some of our greatest challenges, critical issues in North Lake Tahoe, and very important to the business community that those funds be invested in those places. And so you'll see in the agreement, a lot of the agreement points reflect that feedback from the business community. In fact, this agreement was built entirely around those conversations from the resorts and from the businesses in Eastern Placer County. Some of the agreement points I'll highlight for you. There's more, of course, in the document. And if I don't cover something that you have questions about, I'm happy to answer them. But I just wanted to point out a few key pieces that are in here. So the first one is that, and as I just mentioned, that TOT that's allocated currently to the Resort Association contract, which is about $4 million right now, would continue to fund projects and services in Eastern Placer County. Now, of course, this assumes that the TBID is formed. That hasn't happened yet, so we're a bit ahead of schedule with this agreement, and I'll talk about why it's important for your board to consider approving this today, even though the T-bid hasn't been formed yet. But nonetheless, that is an important component of this document and reflected in the agreement points. There should also be local participation in prioritizing the allocation of those funds. So not only is the business community interested in assuring that those funds get invested in Eastern Placer County, but that they play a role in advising your board in which projects should those funds be invested in the transportation and housing sectors. And also, what was additionally important that I'll mention is that the agreement should address any potential TOT increases over the 5-year term of the T-bid. So the T-bid would be for 5 years. This agreement would commence on the day the T-bid were formed and would run 5 years as well. Some of the concerns that some businesses expressed, particularly lodges, were, I'm supportive of the idea of an assessment. We can put that, but what if the board then also increases TOT? That could push me beyond the threshold that I can handle. And so there was some language added, worked very closely with council as well as the Resort Association to try to capture in the agreement that there isn't an anticipated increase in TOT, or that we don't anticipate increasing TOT over the 5-year period, and that satisfied this requirement from the Resort Association and the board. So I did want to point that piece out for you as well. Additional clarifications. I did want to remind you that a lot of the agreement points that I just covered, I did present to your board last August. Your board didn't have any concerns about those agreement points, and so they are all reflected in the document. After that meeting, there was some additional review of the draft by County Council and the Resort Association, and there were some additional clarifications added to the contract. And that includes that there would be that we would ensure that destination marketing services would continue if the T-bid is not renewed. So the concern is we get the T-bid through, it exists for 5 years, it's not renewed. What happens to the Resort Association and all the important work? So they wanted to have some assurances that the county would continue to support the organization and that important work that it does in Eastern Placer County. Additionally, to further clarify the piece about local participation and advising how the funds are spent, the Resort Association wanted to be sure that your board knew that it was their intention to be the organization recommending that allocation to you, that they would develop a subcommittee, and in the agreement it outlines a little bit more about what that subcommittee may look like, who would be sitting on that subcommittee, et cetera, but that they would be advising your board directly on how those freed up TOT dollars are spent. And then finally, the Resort Association, as I mentioned, the 2% North Lake Tahoe TOT will sunset in 2022. So it will be very important that we extend that beyond that period of time. And the Resort Association is committing to supporting extending that 2% North Lake Tahoe TOT rate in perpetuity. And so we'll be working closely with them in the upcoming months on that piece. As I mentioned already, the agreement is contingent upon acceptance, of course, by your board, and then the formation of the T-bid. Because the agreement points were very important to the business community, the Resort Association felt it was important to get this agreement in front of your board. If your board approves the agreement, then that would help them when they went out with petitions to businesses. So businesses had confidence that this agreement existed, that your board was comfortable with it, and that we would actually honor the commitments here in this agreement. So that is why it's in front of your board today. The agreement may be extended if the T-bid is renewed and the agreement is approved by your board, so there's an opportunity for that. The Resort Association Board did approve the agreement on January 14th, 2019. And I did want to mention to you, and this is called out in the document, there will be a follow-on contract. So the Resort Association, assuming the T-bid is formed, would continue to provide services, as I just talked with your board about, to Placer County and the community. And so we would still have an annual contract with the organization to manage and oversee the subcommittee I mentioned, as well as continue to co-chair the CAP committee. And there may be additional services that I don't know, but that is something that we certainly know we'll need to develop in the future. And there may even be a need, depending on when the T-bid is actually formed and when we start collecting those revenues, to do some sort of transitional contract. So that's called out in this document. So I just wanted to point those two things out, just to make sure that there aren't cash flow issues and that the organization is able to continue to seamlessly provide services to the community. I did want to also mention there are other TOT allocation processes in North Lake Tahoe. The CAP committee does recommend allocation of a portion of that TOT to capital projects. The Resort Association is co-chair with Placer County on that committee. The TNT TMA does recommend a portion of TOT for transportation services, so a lot of community groups involved in assessing transient occupancy tax revenues and then where it makes sense to invest in the community. The proposed agreement in front of you will not impact these existing processes, and Placer County and the Resort Association will coordinate to ensure compatibility between all of these processes as well. Just a quick update for you on the projected TBID timeline. January, February, anticipate the petition drive will take place. There are some representatives here from the Resort Association that may be able to provide you with an additional update to this information. February, potentially finalizing the management district plan, we hope. And then I expect that I could bring something forward to your board as early as March, which would include the resolution of intention, a very important step in forming the TBID, as well as that management district plan. Timeline to complete additional steps. There are several other steps that we would have to take once these started, but that, of course, would depend on when your board approves a resolution of intention. But that's the timeline we're looking at as of today. And with that, I will conclude my remarks and answer any questions that your board may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. All right, no questions from board members. So we'll open this up to the public. Anybody in Auburn want to make comments during public comment? Yes, sir. And just you out here? Okay, and then after that, we'll go to Lake Tahoe.
Hello, my name is Rob Couts. I'm with the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association. I apologize for my voice, a bit of a cold. But on behalf of the board as well as the business community at North Lake Tahoe, we are encouraging your approval of this agreement. And as you all know, we have severe shortages of workforce housing units at North Lake Tahoe, and the public transportation system has some service deficiencies. And we're hopeful that this agreement, with the passage of the TBID, will free up dollars to address those issues. And so the plan was the businesses would voluntarily assess themselves through a TBID, which would then free up $4 million in the TOT that currently supports the Resort Association, and then those dollars would be redirected toward workforce housing and transportation initiatives and programs at the lake. And I think this is a great example of a public-private partnership where the business community is willing to assess themselves, and then the board is willing to enter into an agreement where TOT funds are redirected to address these critical issues at North Lake Tahoe. And we are looking forward, the business community and the Resort Association, to working with the board and county staff on the direction of these $4 million in TOT funds. And I do believe that the passage of this, your approval of the agreement and the passage of the TBID is really, really critical to the economic future of North Lake Tahoe. And with regard to the timing, we're hoping to approve at our next board meeting the management district plan. Then that would then go back to county council for their review. They need to deem it as adequate, so we would hope that would occur by the end of January, and then we would begin our petition drive in February and hopefully get that 51% approval during the month of February, and then begin the county process. I think 3 board meetings are required, and there's a 45-day period between the first and the third board meeting. So that's the update, and again, we are very much requesting your approval of this agreement.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you for all the work that your team has done with the county to get to this place. A lot of reiterations, but it looks like a good agreement.
Bonnie, could I just ask Rob to introduce? There's a new member of the team back there that I think not all the board members have met yet.
Yes, this is our new...
Oh, can you stand in front of the camera or the microphone?
I'll kick it off. So I'd like to introduce to you the Resort Association's incoming CEO. This is Jeff Hentz, and we are all very pleased to have him here. So, Jeff.
Thank you, Erin, very much. Greetings. Good morning. Thrilled to be here. I've had a chance to meet all of you briefly before we started this session. Supervisor Euler, haven't had the pleasure to meet you, but hello. Thrilled to be here back in California where I've always wanted to be, and very familiar with the T-bid process. Had a very successful T-bid put in place in Yosemite that I oversaw for 4 years for Mariposa County. Looking forward to working with everyone, and this community is very excited about the direction we're going and the partnership that we have with Placer County.
Great, thank you. Welcome aboard. All right, let's go to Tahoe and any public comment from folks in Tahoe.
Am I on?
Yes.
I'll take my shot. Well, good. I guess it's still morning. Good morning. Mike Schwartz, Fire Chief for the North Tahoe Fire Protection District. And I wanted to start by just saying that we're supportive of the contract. We don't have any particular concerns with the contract. We would just like to request the Resort Association and the board, and they looked at the management plans and the T-bids management plan and the TOT master plans, that you consider safety. I think that's it's the greatest threat to tourism, and I think that I would just like to encourage everybody to make sure we're looking out for the safety of our visitors and our residents in these documents. We all know that visitations have impacts to our local services, and it's important not just to rest that on the shoulder of the existing services that are there now, whether it's the fire district or the existing financial mechanisms, which don't really include a share that's paid by visitors. So thank you. We support this, and if you have any questions, I'm here for you.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. And I think we've got one more.
Morning, Samir Tuma from the Resort Association Board. First, I'd like to say thank you very much for even entertaining and entering into this contract. I think, as Aaron said, and it really is kind of a key linchpin to making the business community comfortable with the way that we propose to move forward. And I think the nice thing is it's also very consistent with the previous resolution from your board regarding committing to spending these dollars back up in Tahoe. And so I think that's great. I would reiterate what Rob said, which is we really would like to get this approved today, because having it approved, and we know it's subject to the T-bid passing eventually, but having it approved is something that, as we go out with the petition to the various businesses in the community, we can say not just that the board is going to consider this, but that actually the board has agreed to enter into it. And so that's very important. I would like to say, we have been having for the last several months a series of discussions with the chief and his staff and some of his board members, and they've been good discussions. We've exchanged a lot of information back and forth and ideas. And one of the things that's a bit of a challenge for us as the Resort Association is to try to figure out, we don't even begin to understand kind of the whole budget for the fire department and what that looks like and how would we analyze it and how would we analyze that need. And that's just something that's somewhat beyond our capacity. Furthermore, we haven't put that anything from the T-bid would be used for these types of purposes. And so perhaps there's another funding mechanism. We have, again, worked with the chief and his group on some ideas that we have, but certainly want to engage with the board and the county on other ideas or mechanisms because, as the chief said, fire department is so important, and we have to make sure that they're adequately funded and, they're able to respond to peak demands in the tourism, that sort of thing. So we will continue that dialogue and invite the county. I know you've had some dialogue, but to continue that and find additional creative ways to make sure that fire's adequately funded. But thanks again for considering this, and we'd be super appreciative and excited if we can get it approved today. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. And any other comments? Okay, we will close public comment and any discussion from the board. If not, I'll entertain a motion.
No, well, I had my light on.
Oh, sorry. Well, there's your light.
That's okay. Madam Chair. This has been an ongoing discussion for several years with the fire services and concerns about funding, and the chief has addressed us several times, and certainly up in Tahoe area at various meetings. So Supervisor Holmes and I serve on the Fire Services Ad Hoc Committee, and we had been talking as well because we've received similar requests for assistance to other independent fire districts, Forest Hill, Placer Hills, some of the other districts in the area, plus our own county services area. So I'm just wondering if it doesn't make sense, because Supervisor Holmes and I asked staff to do some comparison work for us so we could better look at the equity across the county for fire services. If we include the East Slope districts in that, because we're hearing from North Tahoe Fire, we haven't heard from Squaw or North Star, but I'm certain they have heavy tourism impacts as well. I heard from a battalion chief at Alta about the huge increase in I-80 traffic and how tourism is really driving that for service response. So just thinking out loud here, is this a time and an opportunity for us to kind of look at all of these and come back to the county? Because really, when we look at TOT funding, it is about general fund money and how we're using general fund money to help various both independent and dependent districts and how we might use that. So just thinking that might make the most sense. I do know that the Resort Association has talked with the fire chief about potential for supporting their assessment, increasing their assessment. That they have a couple special parcel taxes and increasing those, but their board may not be as interested in doing that, and so they're looking to the county to assist through general fund dollars. So I'm coming around to a recommendation that I think we direct staff to include them in this call volume analysis service response template that we're working on with the Fire Services Ad Hoc Committee to make sure that we understand and provide equity throughout all the districts, because we'll be looking at those other areas on the West Slope. And I think that makes sense as one approach to helping address this.
I have no objection.
Okay, great. Thank you for the input. So
If there's no objection to that, then I'll make a motion to approve this incredible contract. And I know it's taken a lot of time, Karen, especially I know that you've spent a huge amount of time on this.
All right, Supervisor Euler, did you want to?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. I'll do my comment under the motion. That's fine. So I'll second her motion.
All right.
I'll offer my comments. I just, I understand Chief Schwartz's concerns, and certainly he has not been deficient in sharing them with me directly. So I appreciate his advocacy on behalf of his district, but I remind my colleagues that we all have our districts with our own unique demands. South Placer Fire, their territory takes in all of the Placer County accesses to Folsom Lake. Folsom Lake is the most used state park in the California state park system. And if not every year, at least every other year, I have a meeting with the chief and a couple of his board members wanting to know if Placer County is willing to help them cover their cost of operation because of the number of responses that they have in the Granite Bay area and the Rattlesnake Bar area. And so they're looking to us to help fund their part of their operation based on the call demand at the state park. And so if we start going down this road entertaining general fund dollars for meeting the needs of special districts, understand there'll be no shortage of special districts who have needs.
Point well taken. So,
and I'll add on to that. Newcastle and Penryn Fire, respond to all accidents on Interstate 80 as well, and so they may be back to ask us for more dollars to address that as well.
The ever-present challenge of fire service in our county. All right, well, I think maybe there could be interest for the ad hoc committee to do that, but knowing that ultimately we're going to have, I think we're actually going to have a conversation about fire service and all the issues coming up at a workshop in the next month or so, which will allow us an opportunity to have some further discussion about that, which I think would be very helpful.
And if I could clarify, what Supervisor Holmes and I were talking about is really looking at our zones of benefit, but we need to compare them, because if we're going to look at how we're delivering service, we need to understand the levels that our constituents are receiving that are handled by Placer County Fire versus the other special districts as well. So I think as long as we're pulling that data, I think it would be relatively easy for staff to do a comparison all across the board and at least know what we're dealing with.
Right. Great. I appreciate that.
I'm not committing funds. I'm just saying let's look at it and be honest about what the needs are and where we can assist.
Great. All right, so we have a motion by Gustafson and a second by Euler, and all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. And no opposition. All right, we will move forward. Thank you, everyone, for the work. We appreciate that. We're going to move to closed session. County Council.
The board will now adjourn to closed session to consider items A, B, C, D, and F under existing litigation. Item E, Cole versus County, is being pulled from closed session. The board will also consider 2 conferences with real property negotiators.
All right, we'll move to closed session. Thank you. All right, and as soon as we're ready, we'll have council report out.
The board met in closed session to consider State of California versus Silico. In this matter, the board heard a report and authorized settlement. The next item taken was Center for Biological Diversity versus County. The board heard a report. No action was requested or taken. Buck versus County. The board heard a report and authorized settlement. Travis versus Burroughs. The board heard a report and authorized defense of the named defendants. Cole versus County, as noted before, was pulled from closed session. In Ray Ashley Cement Tech, the board authorized settlement. The board then heard 2 items of real property negotiators. On item A, which is the Riosa Red Wing Ranch LLC property, the board heard a report and provided direction. On the next item, the Wagner item, the board heard a report and provided direction. This concludes the report out for closed session.
Terrific, thank you. And with that, we are finished with our business, so we will adjourn until our February meeting, whenever that is. February 11th. All right, thank you.